Together information about individual classes and grades and students and so forth, and our Ryan Hare is out there at the rec center. Ryan?
And just as we approached this scene, Kyle, a few minutes ago, streams of parents running across the street trying to find parking anywhere they could within blocks of this area so that they could get in line at the Northridge Rec Center here to try to meet up with their child. I want to show you the line here. There are a number of parents who, by the way, need their IDs to pick up their children. If you're coming this way, if you are a parent, make sure you have your identification with you to meet up with your child. This is 8800 South Broadway, less than a mile north on Broadway from the STEM school where this shooting happened. We've seen a number of school buses come through here and drop children off on the backside of the recreation center. Those buses, we saw a number of them headed toward the school. There's basically a big circle happening right now, a big roundabout with these school buses taking as many students as they can at a time to bring them to reunite with their parents here. Again, you have to make sure that you have your identification with you to pick up your child. Katie Eastman, our colleague, reporter Katie Eastman, spoke with a mother earlier who was just frantic, very upset about what had happened, but she luckily was able to hear from her child via text, as many parents here have. But the look on so many of these parents' faces, Kyle, really says it all.
All right. Apparently, thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. We were actually just getting a quick update that Skyridge has 2 patients. The information is that they're stable. Stable doesn't tell us anything about the severity of their injuries, just that they're not trending in a bad direction.
But they are also not giving us a condition as far as what type of condition, but that takes us to 8 as far as injured, at least from what the hospitals are seeing. There had been some discussion about 7 versus 8 coming from Under Sheriff Holly Nicholson Cluth from Douglas County. But according to the hospital count now, we have the 5 students who went to Littleton Adventist, 4 of them listed in serious condition, 1 in fair. Another 1 student went to Children's Hospital listed in good condition, and then just getting word from Skyridge, also nearby the hospital off to the east there, that they have 2 patients, unknown condition, but they say those 2 patients are stable.
Let's welcome in now the folks who are joining us for 9 News at 4.
It is a very busy, very complex afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. Kyle Clark sitting with me as we've been here for a couple of hours now, trying to get you the best information as far as a school shooting. This at the STEM Middle School down in Highlands Ranch. At this point, we do know that Douglas County sheriffs have 2 shooters in custody, 2 suspects, both described now as shooters. We also know of 8 students who've been hospitalized. And
the effort now for the foreseeable future will be reuniting all those safe students with their parents. There are 1,850 students on that K through 12 charter school campus, which sits just south of 470 and west of Broadway in Highlands Ranch. It's in the Douglas County School District. And we know that the parents are being directed to the Northridge Rec Center, and that's where you can pick up your students with an ID. The parents are being directed there. We know that elsewhere in the Douglas County School District that the other Highlands Ranch schools went on lockout. That's secure perimeter. That's a situation where they believe the threat is coming from the outside, no threat inside, and that nothing is happening after school across the Douglas County School District. A number of other schools, including Cherry Creek schools, some schools on the south side of the Denver Public School District, and the Littleton Public School District also went on secure perimeter. So we've got concerned parents wondering how they get their kids there. The only specific guidance that we have about a significant change in schedule for those parents is in Littleton Public Schools, where elementary school kids who walk home can be picked up at school with a parent with an ID, and kids will go home on buses if that's their normal route, about 45 minutes late. Just getting word now that Highlands Ranch schools have lifted that lockout, so that process will be returning to normal at Highlands Ranch schools. Now, Chris Vanderveen has been getting a lot of the official information. He joins us now, and Chris, some of the descriptions we're getting about what took place a couple of hours ago is pretty alarming.
Yeah, what really strikes me, and I have to apologize in advance, we're having a bit of a heck of a rainstorm that's just moved through the area, so you're going to hear some of the rain, you're going to hear some of the wind. But that update we got from the Douglas County Sheriff's Department not too long ago that tells us of that talk of a struggle inside the school, and also an administrator sort of initially contacting authorities after hearing multiple gunshots inside that school, and some sort of struggle takes place. We now have 7 injured, at least potentially 8. That number has been fluctuating throughout the afternoon. Initially, the initial reports early on, and obviously these are early on numbers, were 2 injured. And you can expect those type of fluctuations in a situation like this. Law enforcement right now, if you're looking at a live shot from photojournalist Chris Hanson, some of those law enforcement officers that came to the scene are beginning to leave the scene in small numbers. You're not seeing a large police presence that's starting to leave the scene, but you are starting to see, again, yet another sign that the situation as it remains right now is no longer fluid inside the school or outside the school. They feel like it is okay to let some of those law enforcement officers go. But this is obviously, for the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, going to be a very, very lengthy investigation. We are very, very early on in the status of this investigation, and will go on for days, weeks, months to come. Bottom line is, guys, at the end of the day, it has happened again. This time in Douglas County, Colorado, where students inside a school have been shot, injured by, the last word from the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, 2 suspects inside the school. Multiple shots fired inside the school, multiple injuries, as of last count 7. So it is very bad news, alarming news for parents in this part of the city, in this part of the county. Certainly nothing anybody expected waking up today that something like this would happen. But again, it has happened again in Colorado, another shooting inside of a school.
Well, and it's something that we've noted, Chris, in what we were hearing from the undersheriff about the police response being nearly instantaneous to the call, and some of that has to do with the proximity of a Douglas County Sheriff's substation being right next door to the school. But even so, that as police arrived, they too heard gunshots. They were continuing to fire their weapons in the school as police arrived.
And those officers went in as their training dictated. You heard the undersheriff say that is the value of training in a moment of crisis. If you are repeating an action, you stand a better chance of achieving your objective than if you are just attempting something for the first time. And inside that school, obviously, as parents are sadly acquainted, those students were in lockdown drills where typically the doors are locked. Perhaps the window on the door is covered and the students take shelter within the room. And to think that that happened around 1:55 this afternoon, and for all we know, there may be students who are still in that defensive posture there in the school all these hours later as they go room by room before they feel like they can release everybody.
You start to assess the damage done, and we certainly don't know anything about the 2 suspects at this point. We do know from the undersheriff there were reports of 7 or 8 injured. We now have, via hospital checks, a total of 8 injured. 5 of them went to Littleton Adventist Hospital, where 4 are listed in serious condition, 1 in fair. Another one went to Children's Hospital, listed in good condition. Skyridge Hospital, also nearby, that took in 2 students as well. No update on their condition. They are both simply described as stable, but you also have to assess the damage done to all of the other students, those who maybe weren't physically injured but were witnesses, those who had to run in fear for their lives. It is something that unfortunately we will once again have to address here in Colorado.
This happens on a school property with 1,800 plus students that Jeremy Hola from our 911 Know team was telling me is roughly the size of a football field.
Right.
This is not a large school campus. That's a lot of kids in a very confined area, and it is in a part of town that is densely developed and developing still from some of the construction that we've seen around the school area. This incident sent ripples throughout the community. Our Marshall Zellinger is taking a look at what else is happening in that area of Highlands Ranch. Marshall?
I want to reiterate the most important thing, the school being STEM here, nearish C470 and Broadway, but it's the rec center at Northridge, the Northridge Rec Center near Northridge Road and Broadway. That's where parents want to go. I know you probably know where this is. It can be a confusing time with all the information you're getting, a shooting at a school. This is the most important information for parents and students to be reunited together. Littleton Adventist got the most of 5, which is a straight shot up Broadway of the victims. 5 there, 4 were serious, 1 was fair. The 1 good condition at Children's Hospital, really just on the other side of this construction area. I know I've written all over this, but as Kyle was saying, this is being a developed area, and you can see on this map, which is from 2019, there's a lot of development still happening in between where Children's is and the STEM school. We heard no school resource officer assigned to the school, but that sheriff's substation is right here, and it's a straight shot up Ridgeline Boulevard. You don't even have to hit up Broadway. You can go straight up that road to get to the school, which is probably why deputies heard shooting when they got there, because they are so close to where that is. We also mentioned 2 other victims taken to Skyridge. I don't have it on the map here. It's farther down, closer to Park Meadows. And you know, we don't have any reasoning for why they went to a farther hospital, but that added up to 8 victims at nearby hospitals. But a lot of this happening in the same area, and it's good that this place has been developed to have those resources nearby. Kyle and Tom.
Certainly a lot of neighborhoods, there are shops, there are certainly some big stores, and many people who live in that area, and they're all going to be impacted. We've seen the huge police presence down there already, and we've added to that to the mix a weather problem as well now.
Yeah, we've got some lightning moving through the area, which can obviously just do nothing but complicate the situation for those families, those hundreds of parents who are coming down there hoping for reunification with their kids. Kathy?
That's exactly right, Kyle. You know, they're waiting in line to get into the Northridge Rec Center there. They're trying to get information. Roads are wet, traffic is stalled, and now people are getting wet. And the heavy rain will continue for at least the next 20 minutes or so. We do have lightning in the area as well, complicating efforts from the air and on the ground. Heavy, wet thunderstorms rolling off the foothills from the southeast toward the east-northeast. None of these cells severe as of yet, but certainly impactful in that area right around the Lucent Boulevard area, in and around Highlands Ranch, E470 at the intersection of I-25. Areas in dark orange are where we're seeing some of the heavier rain. Lightning detection is picking up a bit of lightning in the area as well, and the storm line is tracking toward the east. Further south, concerns for tornadic development in southeastern Colorado. We're monitoring a tornado watch that was just issued there, and in the high country we're bracing for snow. But right now all eyes are on that E470 and I-25 corridor in and around Highlands Ranch. A heavy thunderstorm moving through the area, lightning in the area, and up to a ½ an inch of rain possible. Once this line moves through in the next half hour, we are hopeful that things will settle down in that area just a little bit. We'll let you guys know if the storm reaches severe limits. At this point, just a thunderstorm with heavy rain and lightning tracking east, northeast. Tom and Kyle.
All right, Kathy, thanks very much. From a law enforcement standpoint, we do know how this works and how different areas come to help. Jefferson County and having some of their investigators already going over there, as well as some victim advocates who will be wanting to make sure that anyone who needs any help after what's happened today gets the help they need, and that Douglas County's victim advocates aren't overrun, because they could have quite a few customers, I'm afraid to say,
sure,
with so many kids in that school.
Lots of people wanting to talk. One person that we're going to hear from for the first time coming up in probably about 20 minutes or so is Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock. Recognize his name and face, pretty vocal guy in the community. His undersheriff has been running point on this in the first couple of hours. We are expecting to hear from the sheriff directly in the neighborhood of 4:25 or 4:30. We will bring that to you live, weather dependent, if we're in a safe position in order to transmit that broadcast back, or whether we just need to tape it and then send it back by other means. But we'll get it to you, and we'll get the information to you instantaneously from Chris Vanderveen and Chris Hanson, our crew down there at the briefing location.
Understanding what happened today is going to take some time, but what's paramount within the moment is these families trying to make sure that they know where their kids are, that their kids are safe. And again, at the Northridge Rec Center, those reunifications are taking place. Let's go back to Ryan Harrer for the latest from that scene, which I'm sure is a very busy place right now, Ryan.
It is. This whole area is a busy place right now, Tom, because people are simply trying to find parking. Parents are, just so that they can get to this Northridge Rec Center. This is 8800 South Broadway, where all parents need to go to pick up their children, and they need to have an ID with them. I want to show you the line that parents have formed out in front of this building. Many of them have actually moved inside, especially with this lightning, this rain moving through the area. And then you also see these school buses. This is what's happening. All of the students are coming from STEM school about a mile away from here on Broadway, less than a mile away, getting on these buses, and they're being taken to the back of the complex here so that they can reunite in an orderly fashion with their parent at Northridge Rec Center. Again, this is 8800 South Broadway, and you need an ID to meet back up with your parent. Kyle and Tom, I was arriving here just about 20 minutes ago when you saw all of these parents kind of lining the street, trying to find parking, and then as quickly as they could move over to this area to find their child. And the frantic look on their faces really said it all. reporter Katie Eastman actually spoke with the mother, who has an 18-year-old senior who says she was inside the classroom when one of the shooters started firing. Take a listen to this.
We chose a small school because we thought that they'd be safer, because we thought that everybody would know everybody, and the teachers with smaller classrooms would get to know the students better, and felt like that would decrease the chances that a student could get in this sort of situation without somebody recognizing. So we had no warning. To the best of my knowledge, I mean, the kids didn't know of anything as far as anybody even playing around or threatening or anything. And a little numb. I'm glad they're both okay. It was a while before I knew my son was okay.
And again, she was able to speak with her daughter and knew that she was okay. So that's great news for that mother. But of course, for the 8 other people who were injured in this shooting, many parents, I'm sure, those parents very concerned right now. One more time, this is the North Ridge Rec Center, where all parents from the STEM school need to come to meet their children, and they need to have an ID with them to reunite. We've seen several buses move through just in the last couple of minutes. Tom, Kyle.
Thank you. You hear that parents' calculus about selecting a school in which she thinks her child is less likely to be shot at school, which you and I had this conversation after the last one of these about my wife and I having conversations like that.
It's alarming, and you also see things like today, the capability and the ability of everyone to respond to this, that at the rec centers ready to go. People know where to go, and it's good that everyone knows how to do this, and it's terrible that everyone knows how to do this. This has been something that has been drilled, understood, seen before, and it's one of those things that you just hope doesn't happen to you, to your neighborhood. But as you see these pictures, you get an idea about the STEM school in Highlands Ranch today, famous for all the wrong reasons. And when a story like this happens, remember, this goes pinging around the globe, and everyone who knows everyone starts asking questions about Colorado and about schools, and certainly, guns will be discussed again down the road and things like that. But if you know anybody from out of state who knows someone in Colorado, they're asking questions. Where is everyone? Are you okay? What's going on? But again, the STEM school in Highlands Ranch now is at the center of this, and will be for at least a few days, if not longer.
You see those folks there, presumably parents outside the rec center gathered together and waiting for word on their students who are being bussed back over. We tend to think about these incidents happening in high schools. And this incident, according to deputies, began in the middle school, but in a compact school campus that includes 550 elementary schoolers. And you have to imagine when they said that some of the kids ran out of the school, presumably those are probably high schoolers, or probably older kids, which means that it very well could be some of the younger kids who are just now being moved over after a number of really scary hours to meet back up with their parents. A logistical note for folks who have kids in other Highlands Ranch schools within the Douglas County School District. The district is saying that they have brought a lot of their buses here to STEM Highlands Ranch to help with this situation. So they are saying, if at all possible, if you have a kid in another Highlands Ranch school, pick them up there, because they don't know when they're going to be able to get the buses back out to the other schools.
Part of the confusion today is what was described earlier by the Douglas County Undersheriff was self-evacuation, which, some of these kids just got up and ran. And as far as them and knowing where they're supposed to be or where they're supposed to connect with parents, that will add to the mystery at this point. And that mystery is a deep chasm if you are a parent at this point. All that you have now is the clock and the hope that you will be reunified with your child any minute now as you go over to Northridge Rec Center. So this is I think a very complex, critical, and incredibly emotionally difficult time as they try to account for 1,850 students, but then there are all the others, all the people who work in that facility, and all the people nearby as well. So it's here we are again.
Yep.
Here we are again.
So you see us, we're doing the same thing a lot of you are. We're trying to gather good confirmed information as opposed to the rumor of the hour to pass it along to you. One of the most significant developments within the last hour is the fact that deputies are now referring to 2 shooters as opposed to 2 suspects. And as you try to picture what deputies encountered when they got to that school within minutes of the call from a middle school administrator that there were shots being heard on the campus, there were still being shots fired, and that there were 2 shooters involved. We can now pretty safely say that we believe that there were 8 students injured. The sheriff's department was saying, or sheriff's office, pardon me, was saying 7 or 8, not involving the 2 suspects. Area hospitals have checked in with us to say they have 8. That obviously could include a suspect. We don't know that. In terms of the extent of injuries, we know that there are 4 patients at Littleton Adventist that are in serious condition, which means that their vitals may be unstable, and it's not clear which way their medical situation is trending at this point. There's another fair patient, which means stable vitals. There at Littleton, there's a patient in good condition at Children's South, and then there are 2 patients at Sky Ridge, both described in stable condition, which doesn't tell us anything about the severity of their injuries, just that their condition has stabilized.
We also watched an absolute phalanx of first responders. It wasn't just that Douglas County substation being so nearby. We saw responders from everywhere, from police, fire, ambulances were rolling in as well. We saw the state patrol, and now we're also seeing some of the other surrounding agencies. Chris Vanderbeeden talking about Arapahoe County bringing their communications the vehicle over. Jefferson County lending its help as well. We are expecting to hear from the Douglas County Sheriff, Tony Spurlock, coming up at the bottom of the hour with the latest on what has happened out there, at least as far as official information, which is pretty hard to come by. We're looking at a situation now that is not even 2.5 hours old over at the STEM Middle School in Highlands Ranch.
I think everything that we have learned so far suggests an overwhelming and immediate law enforcement presence there in the area. And yet, interesting to hear the undersheriff say that some of the first officers in, maybe not the first, but some of the first officers in, encountered a struggle already in progress. So one of the things that we're trying to understand is, was there an attempt by school staff or by students to disarm the shooters plural as described by the sheriff's office? Was that simply responding officers seeing the first few officers in the door engaging with the suspects? We don't yet know that at this point, but that's what they encountered in just this very rapid sequence of events that begins right before 2 o'clock.
And when you talk about that sequence of events, and there will be a timeline, but you wonder, because of what Rocco DeChalk told Steve Steger, that one student who was apparently shot was actually to go off campus despite being wounded and run to Rocco DeChalk's house for no reason other than it was nearby. And Rocco was able to help him get medical care. But it gives you an idea of the time it takes and also the proximity. We've talked about the size of this school itself not being this giant footprint that many schools are on now. This is not a big piece of land, and it is wedged right in between all those shopping centers and golf courses and hospitals and hotels and homes in the neighborhood. But that this one injured student was able, despite being shot, to run across the street or however far Rocco lives and tell the story. And Rocco told it to Steve Steger.
I came out, my neighbor was on the porch. She said somebody was shot down by the mailbox, so I ran down there, and sure enough, there was a young teenage boy shot in the back, and he was with a friend and another teacher. The teacher called his mom, the kid's mom. I dialed 911. They told me to get him into the house, so I picked him up, and me and his friend took him into the house and brought him into the kitchen. The 911 operator said it might take a little while to get an ambulance there.
Was he talking to you?
He was. He was fine. In fact, he wasn't. The 911 asked me to pick up his shirt and see if there were 2 holes. There was only one, and it was barely bleeding at the time. So the kid, his friend that was applying the pressure, did a good job. So when he said it was going to take a while, I kind of ran out front. I found a police officer. He helped flag down an ambulance. We got him in front of my house, and the ambulance driver came up, and we carried him down to the ambulance. So he was talking. He seemed okay. He was able to talk to his mom, so I think he'll be fine.
Did that teen tell you anything about what happened inside there?
No, and I didn't ask. He had a hard time getting from the mailbox. It was probably 2 houses away from my house to my house, and then we had to go up a flight of stairs. So he was pretty exhausted. He was winded, having a hard time breathing, but he was conscious the whole time.
I'm amazed that you are as composed as you are right now.
I'm getting better because I've got 2 school-age kids at another school, and that's all I could think about. So I'm pretty shooken up right now. Probably adrenaline going through me right now, but it was a pretty scary, intense moment.
Yeah, that's
This is a look, a picture that was taken recently inside of that Northridge Rec Center, and it gives you a much better idea than our view from the outside as to how difficult this situation is going to be and how it must feel to be in that crowd and trying to make sure that you're in the right place to get the answers you want to get as quickly as possible. This is the reunification site for students and parents who were at the STEM Highlands Ranch School or are parents of students at that school. So the Northridge Rec Center right now very crowded.
That photo from Jennifer Brown, who works for the Colorado Sun. I believe she used to work for the Denver Post as well. But it gives you some idea of all of those parents there just with that heartsick feeling, waiting for that confirmation that their child's class, their child's grade level is safe and is coming out to head home with them.
You can feel, though, in that room, just in that picture, in that crowd, the heart's beating. That is a very difficult situation, a very difficult room to be in. Ryan Harrer is outside of there, and he's been watching people come and go in the rain today. The school bus is rolling in. Ryan, are they bringing students in still?
Yes, absolutely. We just had 2 more full busloads of students ranging in age. I don't want to give specific ages, but some of them seem pretty young. It seemed like some panic on their faces, concerned, I'm sure, about what's going on. This is the Northridge Rec Center. You can see this is where all the parents line up to go into the rec center. You see that school bus is pulling back out and is going to go back to the school, bring more students back. But you see all these students coming, these parents coming in the rain to visit and pick up their students. You have to have an ID to meet up with your child. This is 8800 South Broadway. This is where all of the students are being taken from about a mile away from the STEM school, north on Broadway. This area is packed. Parking is limited, if there is any left, because there are so many parents trying to make their way to this one small recreation center just north of the school. Busloads, I would say 6 or 7 in the last half hour or so have dropped off students and then gone back to get more. Haven't seen any in the last couple of minutes, but a steady stream here. Tom and Kyle.
All right, Ryan, thank you very much for that. And I mean, says it all there, father with 2 kids walking away, and you can just imagine all the folks in the building there waiting for word.
We are expecting to get word officially from the sheriff from Douglas County, Tony Spurlock, coming up in a few minutes after what had been maybe about an hour of trying to get some sort of official information. Holly Nicholson-Clute, the undersheriff, was very forthcoming with what she knew at the time. But as you could see, by 20, 30-minute increments, the information was changing, the information was evolving, and that's even how she described it as well. So we continue to think that at this point, we do have the 2 suspects, the 2 shooters that we know of at this point, and that seems to be a pretty firm number. As far as those who were injured, well, we believe that there were 8 students, 7 or 8 described by Douglas County Undersheriff, injured in the shooting today, and we continue to, of course, keep an eye on that number and try to get more information about their conditions.
I want to clarify one thing that I think I might have said over the last hour or so in terms of the age of the suspects. I might have misheard what the undersheriff said when she was asked about whether they were juveniles and whether they were students. And we've gone back through the log of that press conference and watched it again, and she did not give an age range. And when asked if they were students at STEM Highlands Ranch, said, we aren't sure of that yet. So just want to make sure you're totally clear on that. It was a little tough to hear the exchange, and I might have misheard it at the press conference, so wanted to make sure that you had that information.
Judging by what we've seen and what we've heard from our reporters as well, the next information that we do get from Sheriff Spurlock probably will be much firmer. It seems like they are wrapping up the beginning of the operation, and I'm sure there's quite a bit left to do, of course, as far as the investigation into what happened inside the school. But it sounds like at this point that they are coming close to having the firm concept of who was in there and how many people came out, ran out, escaped, and how many people were injured. And we'll get that from Sheriff Spurlock coming up momentarily.
Word coming a second ago from Children's Hospital Colorado that law enforcement has released the lockout situation at their South Campus, Highlands Ranch Therapy Care. They had a shelter-in-place order where they just kind of told folks stay away from the windows, just stay inside. Law enforcement has given them the all clear, and Children's Hospital is where one of the 8 patients that we know about has been taken in good condition.
We've been talking with Marshall Zellinger a bit about the proximity of healthcare in that area. There are major hospitals nearby, some literally within eyesight of the school, and also the proximity of the Douglas County Sheriff's Substation as well. But it also impacted other businesses. We talked about there's a Hilton Garden Inn right nearby that had to go into lockdown as well. So we're going to check in with Marshall in just a minute to give you a better idea of what happened in this area just before 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Impacting the family reunifications and just kind of anything happening outdoors down there with some pretty nasty weather that moved through, some heavy rain and some lightning and so forth. Let's bring Kathy Sabin. Is most of that moved through?
It's just about to be on the eastern side of Highlands Ranch, this line of thunderstorms that we've been tracking, Kyle. Strong storms, non-severe storms thus far, rolling off the foothills from the southwest toward the north-northeast. Heavy rain, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain. A lot of lightning in the area, making a very tough afternoon for parents and first responders in that area as the rain continues to fall. The heaviest part of that thunderstorm is east now of Southland and also of Orchard Boulevard, Mineral. It's still raining really heavily over Highlands Ranch this hour. Lightning detection still picking up some lightning in the area, but the heavy part of this thunderstorm line has shifted to the east. We're dealing with residual rain showers and a lot of rain on the roadways and also on the streets there. Tracking the potential for rotating storms in southeastern Colorado with a tornado watch there. And the mountains will be looking at some cold air with certainly the potential for snow levels dropping and winter weather advisories posted there. Tracking the potential for additional thunderstorm development, Storm Prediction Center has the area shaded in green, including Highlands Ranch and Denver for marginal thunderstorms tonight. It is now raining in downtown Denver as well, and temperatures this hour are very mild, but we are dealing with additional shower and thunderstorms expected in the Highlands Ranch area and downtown Denver here within the next 2 hours. And then I think we'll see things start to calm down a bit. The fog settles in, and then we'll be doing this potentially all over again tomorrow. Tom, Kyle, back to you.
All right, Kathy, thanks.
Go right ahead.
I was going to say that Jeremy Hohola has been taking a look into what is happening at the STEM Highlands Ranch and what they've done in preparation of this. Every school has its preparation plan. What have you learned, Jeremy?
Well, you know, I was poking around the school's website, and it's kind of interesting to go over the school's safety protocol, which is pretty typical for the school. And I do want to reiterate what the protocol says, just in case some parents are watching now. Staff members, this is according to the STEM school safety protocol on their website, staff members will not open doors during a lockdown. Visitors will be allowed access to students only if the Douglas County Sheriff's Department determines the site is secure. The school will adhere to all demands by the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. And it lists all other different safety protocols. But another interesting one here is that we realize that the normal parental urge is to come to the aid of your child, but in an emergency situation at school, you will not be able to help and may even become a hindrance. So an interesting reference to the safety protocol there. What's also interesting, and Kyle, you've mentioned this on air, that this school sits on about 4 acres of land. It's a small campus. It's about 56,000 square feet, according to the Douglas County Assessor's Office. That's roughly a little bit smaller than the size of a football field. So you have 1,800 students in this campus, so it's kind of in a crammed area, so you can imagine kind of what law enforcement had to deal with while they were responding to this campus. So
I think it's kind of interesting to look at the safety protocol and kind of like reiterate it's really important for parents to take a look at this stuff and pay attention to their each of their school's safety protocol, because this is when stuff like this really matters. And you can see right now that and it appears the school officials have been following this protocol from what we can see. It does say here that the school district or the school will notify parents about emergency information on their Facebook and Twitter accounts. We haven't seen that yet, but obviously, understandably, they may be very busy with what's going on campus right now. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Talk about parents. It's interesting because they, understandably so, are the least drilled of the entities involved. Students drill, teachers drill, law enforcement drills. Parents are given instructions, and who knows how detailed they are or how detailed parents go into them, but they are certainly the least practiced of those people affected by an incident like this.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, though, one thing that you take away from that safety protocol, which is just kind of good common sense, is that the school is trying to avoid an avalanche of parents and community members reaching out directly to law enforcement for information. Obviously, law enforcement will put out information on social media through us in the broadcast media, and the school will do the same, but they're trying to avoid people proactively going to law enforcement to ask for this. I got a note a couple hours ago from emergency dispatcher, 911 dispatcher, talking about the people calling 911 asking for information.
Yeah, and complicating the situation.
Yes, and by with no malice or intent to interfere, but jamming the lines, asking for information when there were other things that they needed to be doing.
Marshal Zellinger, we've been talking about keeping an eye on what it looks like down in this area. People in the south side probably know this area pretty well. It's a busy part as far as businesses, and people go to the movies right nearby there. But they also know that C-470 is a pain. It's a mess. It's always been like that. It's under construction all the time. But Marshal, give us a breakdown on what is in this area and what was impacted a little before 2 o'clock.
And I don't do this for people watching saying, hey, I want to go check out a scene. It looks like that's something I want to be a part of. That is not the point of this. This is a confusing time for parents who are seeing the alerts of a shooting at STEM, which is right here near-ish, C-470 and Broadway. By the way, I got a text from someone that freaked out when they saw one of our push alerts saying STEM, because that's science, technology, engineering, and math. There are a lot of school districts that have STEM schools. This is the STEM school in Highlands Ranch. We talk about making it convenient for parents to reunite with their students without bombarding 911 perhaps, or reaching out directly to law enforcement. That's one of the reasons there's a location nearby that law enforcement picks that's as close as possible. It's that Northridge Rec Center. Originally they had said Northridge Elementary School, but it is the rec center that we saw that photo from. And something that I thought was telling inside that photo, if you look at how many people are on their phones or looking down, and it looked like they're texting. 20 years ago, that's not the way it worked. At least now, some of those parents who are still waiting to reunify with their kids at least know something, they've had communication with their child and know that maybe they'll be meeting up soon. We've talked about the location of the sheriff's substation, which is just 1 block to the south of the school. We've heard there's no school resource officer dedicated to the STEM school, but with that proximity there are sheriff's deputies who work inside that building that can be out just like that, which is probably why they were saying they heard gunshots while they were arriving and entering that school. One of the victims was taken to Children's Hospital just here to the west of the school. We've been told that victim is in good condition. 5 others up Broadway here at Littleton Adventist. 4 of them we were told serious, 1 in fair condition, and it didn't fit on the map, but all the way closer to Park Meadows, just south of Park Meadows at Sky Ridge, we heard 2 victims there, but we were only told stable, which is not a condition. They were just stable right now. We have not heard that rating that tells us how serious their injuries were. Tom and Kyle.
Difficult form of triage, not only determining extent of injuries, but where and how best quickly to service someone who's been injured in a shooting like this.
Yep, and our Steve Steger has been talking again with Rocco DeChalk, who is the gentleman in the neighborhood who helped the injured kid that he found outside, which you have to think, think about that complication to law enforcement. You're streaming towards the scene, you're getting a call from inside the school from a middle school administrator there that there's shots being fired in the building, and simultaneously you're getting a call from somebody across the street going, hey, I got a kid over here.
When Rocco said the 911 operator said because it was so busy it might be difficult to get an ambulance there, as we've seen, ambulances were pouring in that area. There was not going to be a problem. It was just going to be a matter of getting that ambulance specifically connected with that one young man.
Those are parents running between the elementary school where they were originally told to go pick up their kids and then the rec center, which is the closer location where they were routed. A number of parents not wanting to try and drive around in that crowded and chaotic area, simply running from one location to the other with the hopes of being reunited with their kids.
We talked about Rocco DeChalk. He talked with our Steve Stager, and Steve is back with us again. Steve, you had the opportunity to visit again with Rocco about his afternoon.
Yeah, we wanted to catch up with him, Tom, and get a better idea of how this all happened. So let me give you some perspective here. The school is right behind me, and this is kind of the middle building where we saw a lot of the elementary school-age kids exiting this afternoon and getting on buses and heading over to that recreation center. Now, if you follow this road right here down into this alley, there's a brand new home complex here, kind of a new home neighborhood here, and that's where Rocco lives. Rocco says that he was sitting in his home office there. He was doing some work. He saw the kids running, and at first he thought it was just gym class. He thought maybe perhaps that they were just doing something as a school activity until he started noticing some of the kids were running out and crying. That's when he got outside, and then he found a student near his mailbox.
They were on the grass. It was the young man, he had his friend, he was applying pressure to his back. There was a teacher here. At the time, the teacher was calling, in the middle of calling the young man's mom. He called, she was able to connect with the mom and talk. I dialed 911. 911 at that point told us to make sure we take cover. So we sat here for a little while. He was kind of breathing hard, but he was able to talk. His friend and I were able to stand him up and walk. We walked approximately 2 houses. He got tired, so he sat down on the grass over here for a little while. We let him rest for maybe 30 or 60 seconds, and then we got him back up, got him into my backyard, and then slowly up the stairs into my kitchen. 911 at that point said it could be a while before an ambulance gets to us, because at that time they thought there was going to be multiple victims. So I left him with his friend. I ran out front. I found a police officer. He was able to help me flag down an ambulance. We got the ambulance in front of the house. The ambulance came out, and the ambulance driver and I helped the young man into the ambulance, and they were able to transport him. The whole incident lasted maybe 5-10 minutes at the most.
When you hear Rocco talk about that intense situation outside and how the dispatchers told him to get inside, I can tell you, we were here in that same area, in the neighborhood here, in the hours after that shooting, and we had a couple of times where police officers asked us to move away because they felt this could still be an active situation, you know, until they clear this building and they are 100% certain that they have eliminated the threat that's inside the building. They want to make sure that they have a strong presence here. We saw officers posted just kind of in position just in case something did happen. So it was quite a hectic situation here in the neighborhood, but Rocco's story is just incredible. And what's remarkable really, as we pointed out earlier, is how composed he is after going through something like that. He says he has 2 kids who are elementary school age, so in this situation, he just thinks of his own kids, and he said kind of adrenaline hits in that moment. He didn't want to talk to the kid about what had happened inside the school just because he knew he was struggling. He knew he was having trouble moving from one place to the other. He just wanted to get him to safety, maybe even get his mind off of it and kind of joke around with him until the ambulance could pick him up. But you see here at the corner of Barron's and I can't catch the other side of that street sign there, but we're right by the school, and it's still a pretty active scene here, Tom and Kyle.
Well, if you have any empathy, you feel the same as Rocco did, that you know what that would feel like if you put yourself or your kid in that situation. You'd want them to have the very best of love and care.
Yep, that kid becomes your kid. You know, you'd hope that your kid would become somebody else's kid in that situation. And that young man was very fortunate to encounter somebody as level-headed as Rocco. Want to give parents in the Douglas County School District and in other neighboring districts an idea of what is going on at this point. We've reiterated a number of times that the STEM Highlands Ranch parents of all those 1,850 kids can pick up their kids with a photo ID at the rec center right there on Broadway. other Highlands Ranch schools within the Douglas County School District. Your buses have been routed to STEM to help with the situation there. If you were able to pick your kid up from school with an ID, you're being asked to do that because all these parents are waiting to be reunited with students at the STEM school, and the buses are being used to shuttle people around there. They don't know when the buses are going to be able to get back out to the other Highlands Ranch schools. There are no afternoon and evening activities happening anywhere in the Douglas County School District in any of their schools. And Littleton Public Schools, elementary school age kids who walk home will be held at school to be picked up by their parents with a photo ID. Kids who ride buses will go on the bus just about 45 minutes late. And there were secure perimeters at Cherry Creek, in the Cherry Creek School District, and some of the South Metro DPS schools, the Denver Public Schools, haven't heard anything about different release procedures there.
One of the oddest shapes of this jigsaw puzzle is it tends to be, as we've talked about, it's sad to even use the term tends to be when you're talking about school shootings, that you're dealing with high school students or even possibly middle school students. This school had a range. And everybody, you know, you're talking about K through 12. So you're talking about very different students, very different parents, all having to deal with this situation, a school having to manage this as well. Those who are very capable, those who are carrying cell phones, on down to little toddlers who certainly need everyone's help. And I think that definitely changes the dynamic of what's happening at that school and at that rec center today.
We think back to just a couple of weeks ago when the perceived threat from a young woman who came to this state on the week that we were remembering Columbine 20 years later, shut down schools up and down the Front Range. 500,000 kids didn't go to school because law enforcement perceived a threat from this woman who took her own life up in the mountains. And here again, a few weeks later, we have parents determining what, if anything, they're going to say to their kids about what happened in another school district or the secure perimeter that happened at their school, or those STEM Highlands Ranch kids. And again, as you said, that wide variety of ages. And I think about the note that my friend Jenny sent. She's got some kids in the Littleton Public Schools, some young ones in a K through 2 school, where she said the school told her that they told the kids it was lightning.
Yeah.
Everybody's staying inside because it's lightning, you know, and then parents can make their choices.
The concern today certainly is for all of these students, but you also have to wonder, because we're talking about two shooters, about who knew what, and in the modern era, the idea that this involved two students certainly does change things. And in the era of social media, there's oftentimes discussions or understandings. Now, to be clear, the undersheriff, when asked if anybody had heard anything, quickly said no. But that's an investigation that's going to be going underway as far as what possibly was known about these two suspects, these two shooters, and what they may or may not have been telling people, you know, either online or offline, about what they either plan to do or suddenly did today. And
the level of caution on this stuff, we just cannot stress, because, again, sadly, we've been through this so many times that there are people out there, there are people who are pretty bent, who rush into situations like this online to spread misinformation, to drop little things online thinking that they can get people riled up, faking warnings, this, that, and everything else. So we just have to be so cautious about the stuff that comes out in these instances, because we know that there are people who get a sick joy out of interfering with these situations, especially in the online space, in ways that terrify and confuse people.
We do expect official information. We had expected it at the bottom of the hour, but Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock is expected to provide some information. We're also getting word now of possibility getting press conferences from the hospitals as far as those that took in students. Littleton Adventist is one of those hospitals that took in 4 in serious conditions, that may be giving us official word coming up.
Mm-hmm. Our Chris Vanderveen has been our conduit to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office and asking questions of the undersheriff, waiting to talk to the sheriff. And Chris, I think back about the decade-plus coverage that you've done on how Colorado has responded to mass shootings to be better prepared for the next one. And setting aside prevention, in terms of response, what we hear described today is precisely what we hope for from law enforcement once they get that call.
You saw that, Kyle, on the ground today, right around 2 o'clock when they got that initial call. And so I'm going to be a little bit distracted here because this is the location where Tony Spurlock is expected to be giving his press conference. But you saw that on the ground today with Douglas County Sheriff's Department, very close. They had a substation very close to the school, but you saw a huge police response. And in addition, because this is simply what we do now here in Colorado and around the country, you saw a number of those law enforcement officers who came to the scene go into that school right away and try to sort of find the subject, find the target, apprehend figure out where those gunshots are. Officers are inside. That's when they start to notice those walking wounded, those other people that are wounded. And again, as we've been reporting for the last hour or so, at least 8 wounded. We're hoping to get an update, maybe some more specific numbers from Tony Spurlock as to precisely what they've seen. I know they've been huddling in a communications unit that's just off the location right now. Just to give you an idea of where we're standing right now, we are in the AMC parking lot. We are just to the east of the school, and there is a very, very large media presence. I spoke to actually a parent not too long ago who was in this area, who's trying to get in contact with a child of his. He had children in both the elementary and in the middle schools, and obviously was very, very concerned. And then he just got a call from his wife that his child in middle school was safe. And those are the calls that have been going throughout Douglas County throughout the afternoon, those type of calls to parents telling them that good news that their child is safe. Obviously, so many concerned parents rushing to the area, trying to figure out what has been happening. And I'm just peeking around behind the cameras right now. It does not look as if the sheriff of Douglas County, Tony Spurlock, is ready to speak right now. But obviously, when that moment happens, we are ready to go, along with a number of other press from the area, and we will bring that update to you live. Kyle?
Thank you very much for that. Just reading through some of the notes that you've sent us throughout the day in terms of the coverage and just the feel of things, I'm struck by this note from Teresa Friend, who writes, "We have been in hell with school threats and danger for school kids here in Colorado." And I think it's important to acknowledge how on edge a lot of families are, how fed up a lot of people are, and just how powerless families feel about what's going on now. And our friend Kim Christensen was pointing out to us earlier today that the folks at Safe to Tell, who catalog anonymously given tips around the state, say that they tend to peak toward the end of the school year when the pressure is immensely high on students. Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock is about to speak for the first time. We're going to head back out there so that we can hear from the sheriff with some new information. Hopefully, among other things, we get some clarity from them that what they put on social media is in fact correct, that this was a situation with 2 shooters. And also hoping for final confirmation that there was not a third suspect involved. Those are some of the questions that we'll be asking when Sheriff Spurlock comes out. There he is behind the beige car. We'll hear from him in just a bit when he comes out to talk with the news media.
Again, that is the Arapahoe County communications vehicle. That, as well as some services from Jefferson County, have come to the scene as well to make sure that Douglas County had everything it needed to deal with a situation that is now coming up on almost 3 hours since the first call came in of shots fired at the STEM school there in Highlands Ranch. Sheriff Spurlock getting some more information before he takes to the microphone. Surely trying to have the most concrete information that he can share with us at this point. We also see the State Patrol as well as other officials making sure that he's fully briefed before he lets us know what he knows at this point.
There has been precious little walk back so far in terms of misinformation that surfaced and then has been pulled back. We're grateful for that. I know that you're grateful for that as well. Just something to keep in mind anytime you're watching a developing chaotic situation like this, there tends to be some kind of misinformation in the early hours, which is why we encourage you to pay the most attention to the sourced confirmed information that we give you, where you know where it's coming from, you can assess their credibility. But even the most credible of sources will get incorrect information. And you heard the undersheriff talking about how reports had changed early on, and that they were very cautious and conservative with the estimate of the number injured, initially being 2. Now we expect 7 or 8 is the thought. Hospitals saying 8. Let's listen in there at the microphone.
And we'll give you as many updates as we can as what we get. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Spurlock.
And I'm going to bring some my support and people that are helping me right here behind me. If you give them a second, and then I will kind of identify and let you know who we have working with us right now. My name is Tony Spurlock. I'm the sheriff of Douglas County, and I am very sorry to have to come to you at this. I will tell you that I have Chief Matt Packer of the Colorado State Patrol and Special Agent in charge of the FBI, Dean Phillips, working with us, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how they are helping us. I also have my Board of County Commissioners here and representatives that represent the citizens of Douglas County here as well to help. This is what we know at this point. We know that 2 individuals walked into the STEM school, got deep inside the school, and engaged students in 2 separate locations. There were a number of students that were shot and injured. About almost immediately as the first gunshots were fired, the school notified the dispatch center through our communications center that there was a shooting at the school. About 2 minutes later, first deputies arrived and engaged the suspects. We currently have 2 suspects in custody. I'm not releasing their names at this point. We're verifying their age. We believe we have 1 adult male and 1 juvenile male at this point. That I'm not going to release anything else until we can positively identify that. We do have 8 students that are in area hospitals right now. Several of them are in critical condition. We are working, and we believe at this point that we have unified their family members with those students. We have 1 other student that has not yet been unified that we know of at this point with the family members. So we are, again, not releasing any of their names, obviously. We are working on getting all of the children reunified with their parents. It's at a local rec center right over here off of Broadway. We know that there are 1,800 kids that go to that school, and we are frantically trying to identify every one of those and making sure that we can connect them to their parents. That's going to take a little bit of time. The crime scene, the interior crime scene, is going to be managed by the FBI's crime scene unit. I do have members of the ATF and Department of Homeland Security over there as well, assisting us at a number of things. We do have a suspect vehicle that is being contained in the parking lot. We're working with the District Attorney of the 18th Judicial District on search warrants on both the suspects' houses and that vehicle at this point. We're slowing everything down right now. We do know that we do not have any other suspects. We have all the people that are involved. So we're slowing everything down, and we're going to try to focus on processing that crime scene, taking care of those who are injured, and investigating this case at this point in conjunction with my partner standing behind me in the district attorney's office on where we're going to go with charges. That's a quick overview. I'll take a couple questions, and we'll see what we can do to help you.
Were the suspects students?
Both of the suspects, we believe, are students of the STEM school. They are not injured.
There was initial reports of some sort of struggle early on. Can you talk about what happened? Was there some sort of struggle early on with this?
Well, I can tell you that there was shots fired. Our officers went in and we engaged the suspects. So that might be some of that information. And then we did struggle with the suspects to take them into custody, and they are in custody right now.
Did it happen in the high school or middle school?
This is a STEM school that goes up to senior.
Where did the incident happen?
It's at a STEM school.
The high school?
It's the high school. I'm sorry.
Sheriff, personally, how would you describe this day, the Douglas County community, and what's your message to parents?
Well, I can tell you that right now, to the parents, we are going to do everything we can to investigate this to determine what happened. We are working very closely with the STEM school and the Douglas County School District on that process. This is a terrible event. This is something that no one wants to have happen in their community. We're going to investigate that, and we will get to the bottom of it to figure out how and what has occurred. Because we are likely to have a criminal prosecution in this case, there's not going to be a lot of information that is going to be shared about the details of those issues. We are working very closely with the district attorney, and what I can tell you right now is that we're not going to share a lot of that information because it will be prudent for a prosecution later down the road.
You said that your deputies arrived 2 minutes after that call was placed by the school. How did that quick response affect kind of where we are right now?
I have to believe that the quick response of the officers that got inside that school helped save lives. We're very early on in this. I have yet to even meet with those officers to talk to them to see how they're doing. But I do know that a quick response eliminates a lot of this issue right off the bat. And so I want to think that is something that helped.
Was there any sort of indication, coordination, sophistication with this type of an attack inside the school?
There's no evidence right now that I can share with you about any of the methodology of the suspects.
Did you guys know these folks? Did you know them before?
We had no further information about those suspects, and we did not have them on any radar that we know of.
How did the struggle play out? What you can tell us in terms of if shots weren't fired at the suspects from your deputies, and how were they able to get them under control?
That I do not have the particular details. I just know that my officers engaged them, and we had them in custody. I don't know where they were taken into custody at the school, at what room or whatever, and the FBI will help us determine some of that with the interviews of the officers in the crime scene.
What kind of weapons did they use, sir? Just
At this point right now, the only thing that we know of right now from one interview is that we have a handgun. Other than that, I cannot tell you any other weapons.
Sheriff, we heard that there was a specific teacher that was targeted. Is that true?
We have no information about anyone being targeted at the hospital or at the school that was involved as an employee or a teacher.
Was there a school resource officer? The reason for behind this? I know it's still early in the investigation, but why they were.
No, we have no information about why we're too early on in the investigation.
Was there a school resource officer assigned to the school?
There is not a school resource officer assigned to that school. They have a private security at that school, but no SRO at that school.
Were all the injured students or staff members or teachers?
No staff members or teachers that I know of that were injured. All of the injured were students.
Do you know current students and suspects? Because you said adult and juvenile. I know that there's a wide range of students in the school.
Yeah. We believe that both of the suspects were and are students at the STEM school.
Students. They engaged the students in two separate locations inside the school. Do you know, was it like specifically like a library or classrooms? When you talk about two locations of each?
They were just classrooms. Nothing specific about those classrooms.
Anything in the parking lot?
Were they confronted by other students at the school in addition to your deputies, or was it do you have any additional information?
I only know about one interview of one student. The other ones have not been interviewed because they immediately went into medical, and so I can't answer that question specifically, but I do know that there was one student that gave us an interview, but I'm not going to release that information at this point right now because it's critical to the investigation.
Was there
to the best of my knowledge, no.
Was there an exchange of gunfire inside the school with your deputies?
That is still under investigation at this point. Like I said, I haven't spoke to them. I have a chief that's investigating that portion of it with the district attorney, and we'll be able to get that information to you probably at a later time.
How old are the injured students?
The injured students are from 15 and up. I don't know the specifics of all of them. I can't tell you male, female, or whatever at this point.
All right, two more questions.
And how serious are the injuries?
We have students that are at one hospital that are in critical condition, and some of them are in surgery right now. We have some of them that are in stable condition at other hospitals.
Can you give a range of injuries, where they were shot or anything like that?
I do not have that available.
Is there any chance that there's anybody still left in the school?
No, we confirmed that there's no other suspect in the school. At this point, we have secured the environment.
Or fatalities or injured people left?
We're not sharing any information about that at this point until we have reunified all of the students with their parents.
All right, thank you very much. All right, guys, once we get any more information, we will send out anything that is releasable. Again, can't stress enough that it's still an active investigation. Lots of information going on. I know that a lot of you have reached out to me and my other PIOs, and we are trying to get as much information to you as possible. So if we don't answer the phone, I apologize. The information that the sheriff has just sent out is what we're releasing right now, and as soon as we get anything different, we will make sure you guys are updated. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. All right. Thanks, guys.
Photojournalist Chris Hanson is moving the camera just a little bit to get Tony Spurlock, Sheriff Tony Spurlock, walking away. Lot to digest, obviously, in that update. I'm sure you guys will have lots of thoughts, but that is the latest from here in Douglas County. We just received that update from Sheriff Tony Spurlock.
Chris, thank you. So want to dive in with one thing that could be a source of confusion for people in the way that that information was laid out, talking about one adult suspect, one juvenile suspect, and then moments later saying that they were both students. So under Colorado law, assuming that that's what the sheriff was talking about, the legal definition, we're talking about one of them being 18 or older and the other being 17 or younger. That's the distinction between adult and juvenile under the law, and as he said, both students.
Hard to piece together also another part of this that we will learn as we go, but this concept of people actively shooting students, police confronting them, describing a struggle, and then both of these suspects taken into custody uninjured is kind of hard to piece together in your imagination, and that's all I have, but it'll be interesting to see how that actually played out in the moment of apprehension.
And again, you heard the sheriff say that of the 8 injured students, they think that they're in contact with the families of 7 of them. He described them as being reunited, so probably they're at the hospital. They're still trying to get in touch with one family. But if you're talking to folks in that STEM Highlands Ranch community who are still seeking information about their kids, please pass along this critical fact. The sheriff says that all of the students injured were 15 years old or older. That's the first time we've heard that qualified. This again is a K-12 campus where you've got an elementary school with 550 kids, a middle school with 700 kids, and a high school with 600 kids. But we know that all of the students injured 15 or older, just one family, it appears, has yet to be notified.
As you may have noticed, it is just after 5 o'clock. This is 9 News at 5. We joined it with a rolling start with this live press conference from Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock as we continue to talk about the shooting today at the STEM school in Highlands Ranch. We want to get right over to Ryan Harrer because he has been over at a very busy scene today. That has been the Northridge Rec Center where reunifications have been taking place for well over 2 hours now. Ryan?
And think about this, Tom. So many of these students had cell phones, right? So these parents had some sense of relief walking up here, but the look on so many of their faces really said it all. So concerned about how their child was doing emotionally and unfortunately some of them physically. I know reporter Katie Eastman just spoke with a gentleman whose son had been shot today. A very sad story there. But I do want to talk about this recreation center. This is 8800 South Broadway, less than a mile north on Broadway from the school itself. Take a look at all these parents who have lined up here, have been very calmly, thanks to the help of police, streaming into this Northridge Rec Center to meet with their students. They needed an ID to come and get them to verify that they are indeed the parent. But so many hugs and kisses, just a huge sense of relief when you see them actually walk out with their child. This is a K-12 school, so some of them, I think that's maybe the most shocking part of standing here today, is watching these very young students, some of them I'm sure who don't even have a full grasp of what's happening today, reuniting with their very concerned parents. So the buses seem to have stopped. The buses were circling through, I would say maybe a dozen at least in the last hour or so, would go from the school to this rec center to drop off all of these students and then circle through into the rec center to meet with the parents. The buses have stopped, so it appears that all of the students are where they need to be at this hour. And again, the steady stream of parents continues here in an orderly fashion. Such a frightening day for so many of these parents. You have to imagine many of them got a text right around 2 o'clock today explaining what had happened, and they all rushed here. The parking situation is horrendous because so many people ascended on this area, tried to find a spot blocks away, and then run up to this recreation center to finally meet with their child. I should also say that the community has been fantastic. So many people dropping off snacks and water to the recreation center, as there are many folks inside who will be here for some time. Tom, Kyle.
you think of the task of parenting, and this certainly doesn't come in your guidebook. You start to think about these things as your children grow. But we just saw these people walking out with their 5- and 6-year-olds, because this isn't just a high school. This goes all the way to those youngest of children. And having to now, having gone through this, explain this further to your child is going to be a very difficult discussion for parents and kids to be had. As far as those injured, it appears, though, that involved more of the high school portion of the STEM school there in Highlands Ranch. Sheriff Spurlock indicating that all of the 8 who've been hospitalized are 15 or above.
So now the investigation begins in earnest, and you heard the sheriff make reference to the process of serving search warrants at homes, plural, and at a vehicle. But not going so far as to say that they believe that somebody on the staff there was targeted or that there were warnings, but obviously we're 3 hours in. But they already have several locations that they're going after to collect evidence.
They also took some of these injured to 3 different hospitals. Most of them, 5 of the 8 that went to hospitals, went to Littleton Adventist Hospital. Jennifer Meckles joins us live from there with the latest on what we know from that site. Jennifer?
Hi, Tom. We just got an update within the last 10 minutes that 3 of the 5 patients who were brought here to Littleton Adventist have been discharged from this hospital. And the 2 of those 5 that are still here, hospital media relations teams tell us they are in serious condition. So to recap, coming to Littleton Adventist, this hospital took 5 patients. When they first came in, they told us that they had 4 in serious condition, 1 in fair condition. We now know 3 of those patients have been discharged and 2 are still here in serious condition. We're standing in the hospital's parking lot outside of the emergency room, just over there, and a bit of a distance away from here, and waiting to learn more about the conditions of these patients moving forward. But that's about all the hospital can release at this point. We've asked a whole bunch of follow-up questions about the ages of these and their more specific injuries, but at this time, that is all they can tell us. Tom.
Jennifer, thanks very much. We talked about 8 originally hospitalized, but now with Littleton announcing that 3 have been released, we now have 5 hospitalized. Those 2 there at Littleton in serious condition, and then we have the 1 at Children's Hospital right next door to the school in good condition, and 2 that we did not get conditions on, the 2 that went to Skyridge simply listed as stable, but Sheriff Spurlock referring to several in critical condition, so we continue to await more direct word as to how they are faring.
One of the things that the sheriff started out with that was pretty striking is when he refers to the 2 suspects and said that they, quote, got deep inside the school.
Well, they walked in.
Yeah, they walked into the building and got deep within. This was not a situation where they confronted somebody at the front door or in the parking lot, as we've seen in some other mass shootings, but that they were inside, and to use the sheriff's word, I believe it was engaged, but we assume that there were 2 shooting locations within the school in which they were shooting at students. So gives you some idea of what could be happening. Further raising questions about the account that we heard from Rocco DeChalco, the neighbor who talks about helping the student outside, that a student injured, quote unquote, deep inside the school, somehow was able to get outside to be assisted. And again, we believe that this happened at the middle school on that very tightly packed school campus where you've got 1,850 kids in 2 connected buildings on a piece of land no bigger than a football field.
So maybe it happened in the middle school portion of the building, but again, Sheriff Spurlock describing the victims as 15 and above. So we're talking about what sounds like high school age students ultimately being the ones who were injured. And he also at one point described the 2 shooters as students. So that would also obviously provide them some amount of access to get into the building, even deep into the building. To better explain what has happened in this area and how things played out, Marshal Zellinger has been taking a look at that area and give you a better idea of what went on there this afternoon, a little before 2 o'clock.
You know, Tom, we've been mapping out where the school is in relation to all of the help for parents to reunite with their students, to the hospitals, to law enforcement nearby. Something we also heard in that news conference from Sheriff Tony Spurlock is that the school, the STEM school here closest to C470 and Broadway, had private security and not a dedicated school resource officer. However, as we've mentioned, that Douglas County Sheriff's Deputy Substation is just 1 block away, a straight shot up Ridgeline there to the school. school, and that they were there within 2 minutes of the first call from inside the school that there was shots fired. And we heard from an earlier news conference from the undersheriff that those deputies heard shots being fired as they entered the school. The parents are being reunited with the students at the Northridge Rec Center. 1,800 students. I did a quick check of the Buell Theater. If you've ever seen a play or a musical, that capacity is about 2,200. So give or take, just the capacity of seeing a musical there now being shipped to one location to reunite with their parents. We heard that update from Jennifer Meckles over at Littleton Adventist. 2 victims still in serious condition. 3 of the others who were taken there are released. We still have that one in good condition at Children's Hospital, and just off the map at Sky Ridge in Lone Tree, we heard of the 2 victims stable. And as Tom, you pointed out, the sheriff said several of the victims were in critical. Stable's not a condition. We just know that 2 victims were taken there to Sky Ridge.
All right, Marshall, thanks.
Yeah, that information that the sheriff offered about students in surgery now, it's not something that we'd heard from the hospital, nor is that typically something that they release without the permission of the families. I don't know if that was a wire crossed or if that is in fact something that's happening right now. All the while, right across the street, those reunions continue, and it was several hours before some of those students were cleared from the school to go and reunite with their parents.
And I think the picture that we saw that Jen Brown took from inside the Northridge Rec Center tells quite a story, because I think for many people, you look from the outside in and you see people stream in and you see people stream out. But that idea that you're in here and suddenly they have to sort out how to sort it out. They have to figure out how to put parents in lines, how to put students in record, and so that they know how to connect people. And there's a time element. You know, you have to do it right, but there is pressure to get it right. And this from Jen Brown with the Colorado Sun sending this picture. And I think this picture tells a lot, because you can only imagine being one of these parents and thinking you're in the right place, but does that look like the right place? You know, does that feel like you're on a line or that you're heading closer to your child? It just looks like it's, you know, it's pretty confusing, and it might be at times disheartening to be standing here wondering how close you're getting to your child and connection once again with your student who you left, took to school in the morning on another normal day.
So Jen Brown, journalist here in town, the one who offered that photo of all the parents milling around, tweeted an hour ago saying, "Names are being called now. Parents told to raise their hand so an officer can take them to a room to get their child."
That's got to be tough.
Cannot imagine.
One at a time. The ones we've seen coming out, though, there appears to be a calmness to it, a surprising calmness to it. And I have to think a lot of that is a parent projecting calmness to the child. It's all good.
Teachers too.
Yeah.
Teachers too, because, until that moment of that handoff, the teachers are there, and the teachers are that front line, and they're the ones who are helping the kids remain calm and safe and know that they're going to be protected. So all the credit in the world goes to them as well today, bridging that gap between something terrible happening at STEM Highlands Ranch and the moment that parents were reunited with kids. Let's talk to Steve Stager again, who's been there in the neighborhood, giving us a better perspective of what unfolded just off of that small campus. Steve?
Yeah, Tom, or Kyle, we were just out here not too long ago chatting with Rocco DeChalk, who we've been chatting with all afternoon long, the gentleman who found one of the students kind of near his home. But I want to give you some perspective. We just heard Tony Spurlock talking about a car in the parking lot. We've been trying to watch and see if police are focusing on any of these cars here. We're on the west side of the school. We haven't really noticed anything, but I did notice when we got a little bit further down the road, police asked us to move a little bit further away. So we're just trying to get an idea of what exactly is going on here at this scene. So you talked about the frantic nature at that reunification center. When we got onto scene here, probably about 30 minutes after the initial call went out and parents started getting here, we ran into one parent who was just frantic and trying to get as much information as she could. Thankfully, she got information that her son was inside okay. The teacher actually called this mother to say he's okay. We're going to get him to the reunification center, and everything was all right. But we did get a chance to talk to one student who got out of the school and was on his way out with his mom and I believe his grandma. Take a listen.
I heard a scream. I think it was from the, I don't know where exactly it was, but I think it was the study hall, which is our high school cafeteria.
Okay, so then after all of this happens, how did you end up getting out of there?
My dad, who's an officer, raced down here and he got me out of the building.
He got you out?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming he got some other
Yeah, he
kids
got
out
the
too?
entire class out with a team.
Gotcha. How are you doing right now? That's an important question to think
I'm
of.
just a bit shaky. I'm scared, but I'm glad that I'm safe and I didn't get hurt, and I'm glad that a lot of people I know didn't get hurt either.
So one of the things that struck me in my conversation with Bryson there was, he said it took everyone in his room a few minutes to realize that this was a real situation, that they've drilled this so many times, that they've been through this, they've practiced what to do in situations like this, that it took a little while and it took the actual sound of gunshots for them to realize what was actually going on inside the school. You're looking right now at the windows of what appears to be like a cafeteria inside the school there. On the outside it says 2019. Trying to figure out which building is which here so we can get that to you to understand what happened where on this crime scene. But as you might imagine, police will be here for quite a long time trying to piece together what happened inside the school. They have a large area closed down, and in fact there's still some confusion about where they want folks to stay away. The best bet is just to stay out of this area near C470 and Lucent where this school is, and just give police the space they need to do what they need to do. Tom and Kyle.
All right, thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. One thing that kind of slipped through the cracks when we were going back through Sheriff Spurlock's press conference, and he forthrightly offered a lot of information in a short period of time, to his credit. But one of the questions that he was asked is, were these shooters known to law enforcement? Were they watching them? Were they aware of them? So on and so forth. Obvious question that's going to be asked every time. He said no. Said they were not previously known to law enforcement.
Not on their radar, he said.
Yeah.
And the only other real specific he involved was one handgun recovered that he knew of at this point. So details, we're looking at less than 3.5 hours since this all started. So details are still going to be flowing in.
And so to take you back to the beginning here, 1:54, 1:57 in the afternoon, the call comes in from a middle school administrator there at the STEM school, Highlands Ranch, that K-12 campus, which is nearby Broadway and 470 in Highlands Ranch. That call of a shooting. The shooting continued through the moment in which officers arrived. Minutes later, they went in, they confronted the suspects. The suspects struggled with the officers, but were taken into custody uninjured. I think there are going to be a lot of questions about how in the world that happens, but not before 8 students, we believe, are injured, and they were taken to 3 area hospitals. The 5 that went to Littleton Adventist, 2 currently in serious condition, which means that their vital signs are unstable or may be unstable, and 3 have been discharged. So very good news there. I think we just need to update some information on that graphic. Law enforcement are no longer sweeping the building. The kids have been cleared. Let's just take that down if we would. We need to get some updated information on that. Here are the school buses that were used. They were brought in from across the Highlands Ranch schools in the Douglas County School District in order to facilitate the movement of all of those hundreds of kids over to the rec center.
We do know, though, in Sheriff Spurlock talking about the condition of those who were hospitalized, he used the term several of them in critical condition. So the concern still very much is out for those students in that shape who went to the hospital today. This is when the buses were moving. The rain and lightning came shortly after police had cleared the scene, so to speak, but we're now trying to facilitate the movement of students, get them to the rec center where they could begin that reunification process. And you can imagine the size and scope of that operation with well over 1,500 students needing to be processed back to their families.
This is a very specific request that went out from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. We will pass it along to you here for what it's worth. They sent out a note saying, if you are a host family of a foreign exchange student from that STEM school in Highlands Ranch, please go to the Target store on Sergeant John Stiles Boulevard in Highlands Ranch to reunify with your student. So it sounds like there they have a specific situation with one kid that they need to reunite with a host family, but they felt like that should be a public request, so we are happy to pass it along to you with the hopes that that exchange student can get reunited with his or her family.
Which takes you back to the self-evacuation problem and trying to account for everyone at this point.
Yeah.
You're trying to locate many. Kim Christensen had visited with us earlier talking about some of the math placement testing that may have been going on at the school today. And if in fact that was taking place, that many of those students would have had their cell phones taken from them for the testing, which all of a sudden becomes a very much of a complicating, mitigating factor as they're trying to locate either their family and friends or their family and friends are trying to locate them. But we're not sure how that played out. But if that were taking place, you could see how that would just be another monkey wrench like lightning today happening while everyone's trying to sort this out.
Yeah, yet one more complicating factor. Yeah, for all of the families who are dealing with this. The questions for the sheriff that are very preliminary at this point are the questions that you would think would exist, and so many of them revolve around the why, and he said they're not to the why, obviously, just a few hours later. And nor would they be unless the suspects had made some kind of pronouncement about the why. But thus starts the investigation with search warrants on multiple homes plural is what the sheriff said, as well as a vehicle for these two shooters. We will reiterate that school shootings are a statistical rarity, certainly not the U.S. compared to other countries, but in terms of the number of kids who are safe on any given day in the U.S. versus not. But the reason why we point that out is to say that incidents with multiple shooters are exceptionally rare. So I know that they'll be looking at that in terms of planning, coordination. You raised those questions earlier. And all of a sudden now, from a law enforcement perspective, they have at least 2 points in which information is being passed back and forth, if not more people. And who might have been in a position to intercept some of that information?
Well, and you're going to start with whatever social media profile that these two suspects had. And the concept of it being two instead of one completely changes not only the potential of what they could have done, but the idea that there was some sort of plan, some sort of coordination. And, you know, who knows, it might have been 15 minutes of planning, but it also might have been 3 weeks or 3 months, and that somewhere there were nuggets. And it's always easy, I think, to deconstruct and find that matrix and make it look like it was something that was easy to see. But we'll be learning quite a bit more about who these two people were, what may have motivated them. But more importantly, today our concern is for those 8 who were injured, and for all those other people who had to go through it, witness it, and a school definitely rattled, in a state that once again has to manage not only this idea of a school shooting happening here, but the way that resonates in and outside of Colorado.
Let's listen to a moment for some of what the sheriff had to say about the shooters.
2 individuals walked into the STEM school, got deep inside the school, and engaged students in 2 separate locations. There were a number of students that were shot and injured. About almost immediately as the first gunshots were fired, the school notified the dispatch center through our communications center that there was a shooting at the school. About 2 minutes later, first deputies arrived and engaged the suspects. We currently have 2 suspects in custody.
So we've had a number of folks reach out to us via email and via social media already talking about the idea of what happens when we're to the point that we feel like we can release names publicly. Law enforcement will confirm names publicly. Is that something that we're going to do? We've had years worth of conversations with you about the idea of how notoriety can play a role in contagion. Mm-hmm. Researchers have studied this in terms of some shooters being motivated by the idea of seeking notoriety. Not all, obviously, but some of them. And this is something that we have a lot of internal discussions about. And just so that folks know what to expect, the prevailing thought that we have after talking with smart, thoughtful people in law enforcement and in social science and with victims' families and elsewhere is that there's going to be an initial period where those names and faces are important to get out because law enforcement want them widely distributed so that anybody who might know anything, have seen anything, had an inkling about what these people were up to can come forward with that information. And then after that initial period, then those names and faces are going to fade. Their motivations still become a point of study for law enforcement and for researchers, but the names and faces become less important.
And there's also a responsibility that is strictly journalistic to tell the story.
What happened?
And to tell the story, and that involves the names and the faces. And then once the story has been told, then there is an opportunity to move on. But I do think there is that responsibility that falls onto the heritage of what we do, and what's always been done journalistically is to tell the story. And then find the way to serve the community, which usually is to move on. And it's that window changes in size, but it seems like while there is no right answer, that's the closest we've come to getting it right, I guess.
Yeah, with a continued conversation with you guys. I mean, you ask why are you talking about your process here while this investigation is playing out? I would say roughly half of the social media comments and emails that I'm reading for people today are about that idea, and they want to talk about it. So if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. Chris Vanderveen is out there, joined now by our colleague Kim Christensen as well for their perspective on what we have learned now going on 4 hours in.
Well, Tom and Kyle, one thing I would like to talk about, they've just been talking about the idea of the reporting on incidents like this, and you and I just spent a lot of time talking about 20 years since Columbine. Yeah. And I think a lot has changed on how we handle stories, just like it's changed so much for police and how they respond to something like this.
Doesn't it strike you, Kim, that we are sort of in this situation that we're now used to? Mm-hmm. Law enforcement is now very used to. You could hear it in Tony Spurlock. You could hear it in his undersheriff speaking earlier today, talking about this idea that we sort of knew what to do in this situation. Now, I think it will be, the stories will be told for days and weeks and months to come about how exactly that response went and were there hiccups, were there problems along the way. But right now, it's so crystal clear that we have training in this. We know how to kind of do this because we've been down this road before, unfortunately. And law enforcement trains for this now all the time. So they go into the school right away and they sort of know they don't know what to expect, but they know how to sort of handle that situation. And I think that's really striking on a day like this when we're talking about 8 people inside of a school who are injured because of the actions of 2.
I know. When you hear that they went in, and that's something that we just heard within the last hour, and the sheriff talked about that, the idea that their officers engaged the suspects in this case within minutes, which is very telling, very, very different than what's happened over time.
You think about the Aurora Theater shooting, where there was the police station that was not very far from the Aurora Theater, and they were there within minutes.
Yes.
And in this situation, there is a substation not far, very close to this school, and they were there within minutes, to the point where they were hearing the gunfire, and there was some sort of confrontation between the 2 suspects and Tony Spurlock's own sheriff's deputies. This is the world we live in now.
Yes, it is.
And in some ways, it is terrifying, and in other ways, it's comforting because we have a response that we sadly, like I said, we've been down this road before.
And when we talk about informing people and telling people what's going on, I believe my phone was just ringing because I'm pretty sure it was Jefferson County Schools that were updating us on things, because that's what parents and everybody expects, is they want information from a school district as soon as it happens, because sadly our children, and in this school, which is striking, it's kindergarten through 12th, they are in drills all the time. They know the drills better than anyone else about, sadly, how they have to prepare for something like this. And because of social media, they often hear about it before we even do.
You have a high school student as a son.
Yeah.
I have a grade school student as a daughter. And this is the era they've grown up in.
They know, they don't know anything different.
No, they don't know anything.
And they so often hear about things, especially if it comes to social media, prior to us actually hearing about it.
And word was spreading obviously very quickly. We got here on the scene. We're just a little bit to the east of the location of the school, and got here quickly. And then the Douglas County Sheriff's Department trying to sort of update. The Douglas County School District is here. They're in a bit of a situation because this is a charter school. It's not necessary. It's part of the district. The charter is with the district, but it's not necessarily their purview. So there's some issues that are going to have to be sorted out there in terms of communication. But this is, this is what's happened with Colorado once again in national headlines because of an active shooter mass shooting situation.
Yeah, and some of the things that they talk to us about, as we've pointed out, the fact that there's an adult and a juvenile, but you're an adult when you're 18 years old in Colorado, and students, so we're probably talking about a senior in high school that's involved in this. The end of the school year, when a lot of things are going on, I noticed on the website that they had some of the advanced placement for math testing today. It's a difficult time for
Kim,
kids and parents.
You know this, Kim, for some reason, and I'm sure there's somebody much smarter than me that's going to be able to explain this, but these things happen near the end of the school year. Columbine happened April 20th. They happen, and there'll be a lot of studies in terms of why they happen, but it just strikes me we're near the end of another school year, and yet something like this happens.
And the threats, and then you hear about the scares, and is school canceled or not, and there will be a lot of questions when you point out a charter school, a little different because they don't have a dedicated SRO like you do in most public schools, and they have the option to have a private security. We don't know any details about that. I think a lot of folks have learned that the SRO program is very successful now because they get to know everyone. They get to know everybody.
And they are there on scene, and obviously there's going to be so much speculation, and I try to keep it away from speculation in a moment like this, but obviously a lot of discussion about how soon. You heard Tony Spurlock say he believes that his deputies were on scene in a way that may have kept the number lower. We're talking about 8, and that is horrible and horrific, and for those families involved, life-altering. Could the situation have been worse if those deputies had not responded to the scene in the way that they did?
Yeah, and seeing the images of just those parents, and I know we stayed at a distance, seeing the parents running in rain and everything to try and get to this rec center.
Any parent,
your heart sinks.
Any parent can identify with a moment like that of just not knowing and having to ask those questions. It's tough.
Yeah. So we do not know exactly if they're going to update us again soon, and there's a possibility that maybe we'll be closer moving back to that substation.
They're talking about moving. We're not exactly. We're in the parking lot of the AMC Theater, which is to the east of the school. Not exactly sort of a prime location for a media staging area, but this was very much impromptu. We got the word when the word came out that this was going to be the staging area. I think they're considering moving the staging area to that police substation closer to the school, because obviously with the media staging area, it's sort of a sensitive thing. You have a number of law enforcement responding early on.
Right.
When the initial call is going on, you have ambulances coming out. We saw
that entire street was
circling the area in case they had to land to get patients out. Now that situation has at least calmed, we can move closer to the situation, at least the media staging area.
And they pointed out, right, the FBI is going into the school now. Now the FBI will be going into the school and processing the scene and gathering the information. And we have obviously young people here that are witnesses that are going to be key to this investigation.
This is, as you know, these are massive investigations that take a considerable amount of time, multiple agencies involved. Not surprising at all, obviously, to see the FBI here on scene. This is what they do. They've been involved in other active shooting, mass shooting situations in the past. This is just simply how this goes down. As we talked about at the beginning of this discussion, we've been down this road before.
Unfortunately. All right, Kyle and Tom, we'll keep you posted as far as our location if we move. But right now, it does seem like this location may be wrapping up, and they may be moving somewhere else to keep the media updated on the investigation throughout the evening.
Well, Kim and Chris, I wanted to ask you, because especially relating to the ages of your children, this is a different situation in that this school, there were kids from 5 to 18 in there, and the idea of sorting it out with all of those children, what they saw and what they will now have to experience in the school and in their homes with their parents, that's a broad range. That is, I think, different than what we've seen, sadly, in past stories like this.
Oh my goodness. I can't even begin to imagine. I remember during the elementary school years, and you can relate to that, if there was anything that was even slightly traumatic, they sent an email home to parents. They had counselors on the scene and said, you know, let's address that in the home as you will. But once they get to middle school and high school, they know they're going to find out about it, and they usually have them counselors on the school, but they know they can't keep it secret.
Obviously, and this is a school of what, close to 2,000 students on this campus. This is a large school with a very large range of students and children that are in this school. This is tough.
Oh yeah. You just how they can explain that, I have no idea. My heart goes out to the school because they're going to have to sort through a lot in the days ahead, the weeks ahead, and frankly next year.
Think about all the. I mean, parents have been now having these conversations either directly or indirectly with their children for some time now.
Immediately. You can't hide them from that. And I think, Tom, that is the one thing that separates this from anything else that we have actually seen here in Colorado is the age.
The nature of this campus.
The broad age of this school in particular.
Yep.
Yeah, and it also is, we've seen parents coming out of the Northridge Rec Center with their children and appearing somewhat calm, and the children somewhat calm, and I'm hoping that's just parents projecting calmness toward their kids. It is that picture from inside where you look and see several hundred parents all packed in, waiting to hear their name called, that I think is especially difficult to see.
Brutal.
I can't
imagine.
Well, and I look back to, and I always hesitate to bring up Columbine because I know how they feel too about bringing this up. But the people that we talk to, there's so many teachers that now teach at that school because they love that school and love that community, have a different appreciation for what their parents went through as they became parents.
This is a community. It's fresh on our minds because we talked a lot about it last month. But this is a community that was forever changed. By the events of now 20 years ago. And it changed how law enforcement responded to the school. It changed how parents responded to the school. It changed how students are actively in this school. It changed so much, and it's impossible to ignore on a day like this.
And it is difficult for parents, and so many times parents don't want to have these types of conversations, but this is the time when you really do need to sit with your kids and then just listen, and listen in the days and weeks ahead. So often some of the family therapists we've talked about said it'll be interesting, especially depending on the age level, how conversations come up.
I got a 9-year-old at home that I'm going to have to explain this to somehow.
Right, and school is a safe place, and the teachers love them, and they do take care of them. And you have to talk to them about that, their level, Tom and Kyle.
I want to ask you guys one more thing, but I just want to let people know that NBC Nightly News is airing. It's over on Channel 20 if you're looking for Lester Holt tonight. I wanted to ask you all about those first responders, because out of all the lousy calls that they get every month, every year, this is the call they fear. I think this is the one call that they're terrified they're going to get.
Tom, they're scared of it, but they also know that when they get the call, what struck me is that this is a you don't hesitate kind of call.
No.
Everyone was here. We saw neighboring law enforcement agencies lined up on the street that's just over to that location, lined up immediately. You see a huge police response that comes immediately to the situation, and it is a call. I mean, so think about how many of these officers are parents themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They never want to get this type of call, but when they do get it, they're here like that. And they go into the school and they confront the shooters in this particular situation. And that strikes me as something that's sort of very much...
And just as schools are prepared, I think they feel very prepared now, because they've
prepared
worked,
as you can be.
As prepared as you can be, but they've worked with the schools too. Before this was not conversations that were held between schools and law enforcement, because just no one thought that something like this could ever happen.
And you have to...
And now it's like, you know what, we're partners in this. We have to be ready for a worst case scenario.
You don't know what to do, but you do know what to do. And
Yeah, you do.
These type of situations, that's what happens.
Yeah, the see that police and the law enforcement response and just first responders everywhere, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Once again.
Well, it's great to see. It's also sad to see. It's sad to see the preparation,
yes, it is.
the experience, and every time this happens, and it's even sad to say every time, but we do learn more, and those responses improve, and things get, it's hard to say better, but they do get better at responding. We'll check back with you guys in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
South Metro Fire Rescue has just sent out some information to give you an idea when we're talking about response. 79 units, approximately 148 fire and medical personnel, 3 medical helicopters from across the metro area, all were part of the response to the shooting at the STEM Highlands Ranch School today. This is something that they thoroughly trained for, as they say in their tweet, but as we were just alluding to, it is somewhat sad to think of that preparation being called upon time and again. Not first responders, but where first responders take people. We talked about 3 metro area hospitals that took in patients from the shooting at the STEM Highlands Ranch School today. Jenny Meckles is joining us now from the Littleton Adventist Hospital, which saw the most of those patients. They initially took in 5. Jennifer?
They did, Tom. They took in 5 initially, but 3 of those patients have already been discharged. The latest update we have from this hospital, which is just minutes ago, is that 2 of these patients are still in serious condition. What does serious mean? It's kind of a vague term for people who don't work in a hospital, right? Well, I've asked for some clarification, and the best Littleton can explain that for us is that means the patient is acutely ill. It means vital signs might be unstable, not within normal limits. I know, again, that's still vague, but that is the best way we can describe at this time what a serious condition patient would be like. And we know that Littleton Adventist, again, has 2 still in serious condition among the 5 that were originally brought here from this school shooting today. And again, 3 have been discharged. We've not seen any of these patients. We are standing in the parking lot of the hospital, somewhat near the entrance to the emergency room, but on the back edge. You can imagine security has definitely got an eye on who's coming and going from this hospital right now, including the media reporters here, because this is just such an extreme situation. I mean, 5 patients coming in from a shooting, that's a big deal here. So we don't have a whole lot of more information from the hospital. We don't know what kind of injuries these people that came in here took, but just the latest update that 2 of them are still in serious condition in the hospital as they are treating them. That's the
right.
latest
Thanks,
we know
Jennifer.
from Littleton Adventist Hospital. Tom?
All right. We will get back to you with more as it becomes available, which leaves us at this point with 5 students that we know of still in the hospital, the 2 in serious condition at Littleton Adventist behind Jennifer there. We knew 1 student was also taken to Children's Hospital. That student was listed in good condition. And then we also did not get conditions on 2 young patients who were taken to Skyridge, that further off to the east from that school. We also had quite a story told to us by a man who lives near the school and was just at home when all of a sudden his day changed quite a bit. And he told Steve Steger about an encounter he had with a student who had been shot and wounded and come across the street. And this is Rocco's story of how he helped this young man.
They were on the grass. It was the young man, he had his friend, he was applying pressure to his back. There was a teacher here. At the time, the teacher was calling, in the middle of calling the young man's mom. He called, she was able to connect with the mom and talk. I dialed 911. 911 at that point told us to make sure we take cover. So we sat here for a little while. He was kind of breathing hard, but he was able to talk. His friend and I were able to stand him up and walk. We walked approximately 2 houses. He got tired, so he sat down on the grass over here for a little while. We let him rest for maybe 30 or 60 seconds, and then we got him back up, got him into my backyard, and then slowly up the stairs into my kitchen. 911 at that point said it could be a while before an ambulance gets to us, because at that time they thought there was going to be multiple victims. So I left him with his friend. I ran out front. I found a police officer. He was able to help me flag down an ambulance. We got the ambulance in front of the house. The ambulance came out, and the ambulance driver and I helped the young man into the ambulance, and they were able to transport him. The whole incident lasted maybe 5-10 minutes at the most.
Rocco DeChalk, whose calmness certainly was a form of heroism in what happened today. We are sad to report that 9 Wants to Know has now confirmed that 1 of those victims today has died. We did know of 8 that initially went to the hospital. We knew that 5 were still hospitalized, and we are now confirming that 1 of those students shot today at the STEM school in Highlands Ranch has died from their injuries. We will have more on that, of course, as information becomes available. Right now, we want to check back in with Steve Stager, and Steve, who had been talking with Rocco to Chalk and others near the school, joining us now live. Steve?
And Tom, so all of that, where Rocco lives in that neighborhood back, is on the west side of the school. I want to show you the east side of the school here. This is where the scene really is, where investigators seem to be focusing on the parking lot on the east side of the school. You heard the sheriff say they were focusing on a car in that parking lot. We're trying to get a better vantage point where police will actually let us be and see what's going on in that crime scene. But if Tom Cole can move over to the left here, you see some investigators from ATF here. It's a multi-unit response here. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office here. South Metro Fire has a pretty large presence here, although that has died down as the scene has begun to kind of settle down a little bit. When we first got here, all of the roads basically were blocked off. There were a lot of parents who were trying to get close to the school to try to check on their kids. But Tom and I are going to keep walking around the school here and see if we can get closer to that parking lot and see where investigators are focusing on right now. But again, investigators from ATF, I count maybe 5 or 6 different ATF jackets walking around here on the east side of the school.
Steve, thanks very much. We do know Sheriff Spurlock had talked about search warrants for 2 different homes at least and 1 vehicle, so that may be where that vehicle is located. Again, just to reiterate, the tragedy of the shooting today has now claimed at least 1 life. 9 wants to know, confirming that one of those students shot at the STEM Middle School at Highlands Ranch has died. And Kim Christensen and Chris Vanderbeen join me now again, and what was already such a sad story of another school shooting in Colorado has taken the darkest turn. It's not something we didn't think might happen, but it just hits. It just hits so hard when you hear that final word that one of these youngsters has passed away in what clearly will be identified as a senseless act.
Yeah, we had sort of gotten the impression that the news was not going to be good on that regard when Tony Spurlock was asked specifically were there any fatalities in this, and he didn't want to answer that specifically at that moment, and it sort of certainly gave me the impression that the news was not going to be, and the news had sort of been circulating around here. We obviously wanted to wait on it to confirm it, but certainly the news had been sort of circulating around here of that news, and it's certainly not something that we wanted to report. It's certainly not something parents around here wanted to hear, but it certainly changes the nature of this investigation. I don't know if it necessarily changes the nature of the investigation. We still have a very serious nature of investigation, but now we're talking about a first-degree murder charge that will almost certainly be added in this case.
Right, and the 2 suspects are in custody, which we point out, and they were not injured in this case. I think all of us knew how serious it was when Sheriff Spurlock said there were multiple injuries. And when you hear about many shots being fired, and also the fact that he even said his officers struggled with the suspects a bit, you knew that this was not, I mean, sometimes when you hear these shootings where it's almost it's a random shots fired, or somebody comes in to make a point and isn't, that was very different.
And he also said in his press conference they were able to get deep into the school, which struck me as well in terms of, and I asked him specifically, was there any indication of any sort of sophistication, any planning, any pre-planning? And obviously that will be part of their investigation as well. But you have 2 people acting in connection with each other, go into a school, get deep into a school, involved in multiple locations where there are actively shooting. That indicates some level of sophistication, of some level of planning that goes into this type of attack.
And they do have 1 vehicle in this case that they said the FBI will be processing that belongs to one of the suspects. Again, they continue to say an adult and juvenile. We believe that's an 18-year-old student, probably a senior in high school. And they also mentioned that those that were injured are 15 and older. So you would assume, not knowing the layout of the school, but because it's K through 12, that the middle school students are in one section, elementary school in another section, and high school students.
And that was originally told to us, and I'm not sure if this is still the case, originally the initial reports were in the middle school section of the school.
Right.
But now we're talking about
hearing
15 and older. So obviously there's
we don't
still
know.
more to
Maybe
sort
they,
out.
yeah, and perhaps they, because that's such close in age. You know, they might be.
You have a large
almost
campus,
conjoined.
with a number of students.
Right.
That's clear.
I know. That's just horrible news, and to hear that, and we also can assume that, as you mentioned, that this kind of had been whispered a little bit here, but all the family members had to be notified. As we have spoken, it just for every single parent, when you get that notification, any kind of a notification about a lockdown, a lockout, or we wanted to let you know, you think about where you are. Typically, you're at work, or you might be across town, or you might be at an appointment, and you just want to get there.
What you're doing, and you
get there.
You get there. That's what. And think about how many parents got that call today.
Yeah.
Whether they heard it through social media, whether they heard it through friends, whether they heard it through whomever, and they immediately make that rush to sort of come to the school.
Yeah. Heart goes out to them,
yeah.
thinking about what they're dealing with now, and to cope with this news too. You know, everybody hopes for the best.
We have a criminal investigation though too, and I think that's a sort of a dynamic of this. We now have 2 suspects charged multiple. They will be charged with multiple counts. Criminal counts. Don't know the age on the juvenile suspect, obviously, as of right now. That will be something that, but the decision for the district attorney to sort of make in terms of how they want to charge this. But you can almost certainly bet there will be a first-degree murder.
And probably, you know, half of that student body knows those 2 individuals.
And it'll be interesting. These things tend to not come out of the ether. They tend to not just sort of come out of nowhere.
Right.
So, you know, these things are planned. These things are talked about. And when you have 2 people, this is the reason why there's typically not 2 shooters, is that it's very difficult for 2 people to keep lids on something. Somebody always usually tells somebody. And that will be something the investigators will be asking themselves. Did somebody tell somebody else something
that could have been shared?
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us back to Safe to Tell, and how sometimes we say there are some false reports that get called out to Safe to Tell, but you know what? They'd rather deal with a false report any day, something that somebody says, I don't know if that's serious, but they would rather deal with that.
Think of all the reports that were called into Safe to Tell the week of April 20th,
yes.
or a week before Columbine. Those calls continue to go in on a daily basis. I remember talking to the school resource officer at Arapahoe County, a school that's also had a school shooting, and talking about the number of things he must investigate on a very frequent basis. And most of them turn out to be nothing. But on occasion, they turn out to be something.
And when we think back to even Arapahoe High School, where Claire Davis lost her life, in that case, what we discovered in the months and the weeks after is that there were some signs. There were some people that wondered about the shooter in that case and wondered if that person might do something. And then there were students that provided information too as part of that investigation. And that's part what Claire's parents had fought for, is that this information should be shared within a school, and if a school counselor or psychologist knows something, get that information out to protect our students.
There's almost always, we can't say it in this situation, but history has taught us there's almost always warning signs that are out there somewhere. And again, I mean, you think about the school resource officers and other schools that are worried. Every large school, I remember also talking to the school resource officer at Arapahoe, every large school worries about something like this, and they worry about the possibility with a couple kids that they're worried about. Almost never results in anything,
right.
But they've got to be on their toes because of what happened today.
Yeah, what happened today. And, and as we think of the investigation, it goes to everything from how a young person could potentially get a weapon, where the weapon came from. But in many cases, some schools now have the security cameras outside. They'll be looking at that when the students come and go.
And that's why this is why this is a massive investigation.
Yeah.
You talk about where did the guns come from? Where were the purchase? I mean, we have an 18-year-old in Colorado. As we went through with the Sol Pais case, an 18-year-old can come to Colorado, buy a long gun, buy a shotgun, that can be legally purchased by an 18-year-old. But where did the gun come from? How was the gun used? Were there any warning signs? Were they seen? Did they tell anybody? Did they have any other things planned? Were there any writings online? All of those things that we're sort of used to. We know how this investigation is going to work.
And when you have two individuals, there's more to think about.
It changes the dynamic of a lot of it.
It changes the dynamic very much when you have two individuals and what their relationship was. And right there, you know that at least two people were talking about it.
Yep.
Tom?
It's so hard to imagine how this plays out, but we've been watching those families and reunification, and one thing that Sheriff Spurlock did say, as far as those 8 who had gone to the hospital, that they have been unified or at least notified with 7 of those family members, but there was one family member or one student who they'd not yet been able to unify with family, but hopefully that has helped close the loophole for some of those parents back over at the Northridge Rec Center. And the other thing, we talk so much about this, but it's going to come into play again is mental health. We keep going back to where we stand with mental health, especially with youngsters at a place, like a school where you like to think that between students, teachers, others in the front office, that you have eyes on kids and you get an idea how they're doing. How are they doing? And I know a lot of people will be wondering tonight, could I or should I have said something?
Yeah. This is Tom, as you know, and Kim, as you know, this is a national epidemic. This is a national problem. But why do we here in Colorado have so much experience with this? What is it? And I don't know. There's no easy answers when it comes to this kind of stuff. But what is it? We have had school shootings before, whether Arapahoe, here,
Black Canyon,
Columbine, these type of things. We also have Aurora to look back on, the theater shooting. These type of things keep happening here, and I think this will be one of those things where we continue to ask questions, as we should be asking questions after something like this happens.
And sometimes, as many people point out when you talk about mental health, Tom, that someone gets to a place in their life where they are struggling with depression and other issues, and then the anger seeps in and other things come alive. And while I know they brought up the issue of the idea of once you hear about something like this, whether it spurs more, kids can find anything on their phone. It frightens me what they can watch on YouTube and on their phone, and that we have no idea.
And what was the motivation here? What is the motivation?
I know. And you're going to hear what a great school this is. That's what breaks my heart. Great schools, great teachers, great people. It always is.
These happen in schools all over the country.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what type of school it is.
It's not. It doesn't. But why Colorado? We don't know. But mental health is something we all need to acknowledge. We've talked again and again about releasing the stigma, whether it's men that struggle with it and young people that struggle to live this perfect life that they see on Instagram and Snapchat.
And then at some moment on this particular day, 2 individuals go inside of the school and decide out of their own anger, angst, or whatever, that this is the answer for them.
And this is the answer.
This is the answer.
How can that ever be the answer? So it is never the answer, and it is a difficult day. I mean, we hate to share these stories, and to get this news that a life has been lost is devastating. And for STEM School of Highlands Ranch, we're very sorry.
We will be checking back with Chris and Kim in just a few minutes. Again, we now know of 1 fatality at the school shooting today. It happened about 4 hours ago at the STEM School in Highlands Ranch. There's much more coming up on Next with Kyle Clark. That's you.
All right.
You got everything?
Numb, a little numb. I'm glad they're both okay. It was a while before we knew my son was okay.
It's Colorado again. It's our kids again. It's our society's unwillingness or inability to keep people with the intent to harm our children from taking guns into schools and shooting at our kids. Today, the STEM Highlands Ranch K-12 school, kindergarten through 12th grade. 8 students shot, 2 students in custody. We know the questions to ask, just as we know the unsatisfying answers that will follow. Because it's us again. A family in Colorado lost a child today, killed in America's latest school shooting. One of the 8 students shot while in class at STEM Highlands Ranch. The sheriff says the shooters, 2 of them, were students as well. A middle school administrator called for help just before 2 this afternoon. Shots were heard in the background. The sheriff says the shooters got deep into that school, 2 different locations. Shots were still ringing out as deputies ran inside just minutes later. They captured the shooters uninjured after a struggle. All of the students shot were 15 years old or older. With the suspects in custody, the race to get those 8 injured kids to the hospitals began. We have learned within the last 15 minutes that one of those students has died. That student's name is not being released. Let's bring in our Chris Vanderveen to talk about what we know at this point about the suspects, students themselves. One 18 or older, the other, Chris, 17 or younger.
Kyle, that is true. That's the word from Sheriff Tony Spurlock, who briefed the media not too long ago about those 2 individual suspects. He simply would call them one a juvenile, one an adult. We assume that to be, because that both of those are students, we assume that to be around the 18 or 19-year-old range in all of this. We saw a very large response from the number of different police agencies around this area right around 2 o'clock this afternoon, all coming to that report of an active shooter inside a school. That type of report, that type of call that obviously no officer wants to hear and obviously no parent wants to hear, but that is the call that came in. We understand from the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, multiple shots fired inside the school. When asked if there was some sort of exchange of gunfire with the Douglas County Sheriff's Department and his own and those 2 suspects, the sheriff of Douglas County simply said he couldn't comment on that. He did say that this has been an afternoon filled with a lot of speculation and a lot of fear on the part of parents. This is what he said not too long ago.
We know that there are 1,800 kids that go to that school, and we are frantically trying to identify every one of those and making sure that we can connect them to their parents. That's going to take a little bit of time.
This is now not only an investigation that involves the help of a lot of parents and students, but this is now also obviously a criminal investigation because 2 of those suspects are now in custody. There will be a lot of questioning of them, questioning of their families, and questioning of their friends and people who knew them. Any sort of idea if this was a planned attack or not. But clearly, with those words, as you said, Kyle, that those 2 shooters got deep inside the school, some of the worst fears were realized inside this Highlands Ranch school this afternoon. Back to you.
Because they are students, the ones that all those teachers are there to protect. All right, Chris Vanderveen, thank you. Let's talk about what we know about the students who were injured today. 2 of the 8 went to Skyridge Medical Center. We're not sure how seriously they were hurt, just that they're stable right now. 1 went to Children's Hospital South. That student is expected to recover. 5 injured kids went to Littleton Adventist, including Fernando Montoya's son.
He said that he's okay. They was kind of scared, but the good thing is he's okay. Stay together. It's dangerous outside. We're not safe anymore.
Coloradans in uniform and out came running to help today, and some of them shared their stories with our Steve Steger. Steve, these are people who acted quickly and carefully when seconds mattered most.
And people who were calm and collected in the moment, Kyle. It was amazing to talk to one of the people who actually found one of the victims in front of his house and took him inside until he could get him to an ambulance. We'll get to him in just a minute. I want to show you where we are right now. We've moved to the front side of the school. This is the east side of the building. There's a heavy police presence out here. It appears that the investigation is focused out here in this parking lot and then inside those doors right there. We heard Sheriff Tony Spurlock earlier say that these shooters went deep into the school. On the other side of the school, the west side of this building, is a neighborhood, a brand new neighborhood over there. We talked to a gentleman named Rocco who was at work at home at the time. He says he was sitting in his home office, saw a lot of kids running around, thought it might have been a gym exercise until he saw some of them crying and realized something else was going on. So he ran outside and walked into a situation where he found one of the victims of this shooting.
His friend is a true hero. He applied an appropriate amount of pressure. There was hardly any blood coming out when we saw the hole. 911 at that point said it could be a while before an ambulance gets to us, because at that time they thought there was going to be multiple victims. So I left him with his friend. I ran out front. I found a police officer. He was able to help me flag down an ambulance. We got the ambulance in front of the house. The ambulance came out, and the ambulance driver and I helped the young man into the ambulance.
You know, one of the remarkable things when you talked to Rocco was just how calm he was through that entire situation. And he said he felt he needed to be calm. He needed to not talk about the situation that had just happened, just to keep this victim calm until he could get help. And he said he was even joking around with the young man for a while until that ambulance came and took him away. But it's, as you can see, there's still a pretty active police presence here, though now it seems to be a lot calmer, Kyle, than it was when we first got here. We saw some snipers on roofs around here. And actually there's Sheriff Tony Spurlock actually walking on the scene here and kind of surveying things on the scene and walking around. We've seen several other folks who were in that other area where Chris Vanderveen is, kind of making their way back to the school here. So the sheriff is looking around and meeting with the first responders and meeting with the folks who were here investigating the scene. We hope to maybe even try to grab him and chat with him and just see what he saw here on scene, Kyle.
And certainly that heightened posture was understandable, because for hours they were unsure if there was a third suspect. They eventually determined through a thorough search of the school there was no such person. All right, Steve Steger, appreciate all of your reporting today. Within the last few minutes, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office put out a note on social media. I want to just read it to you here. It says there's a lot of information out in public about details on the shooting, which is not all accurate. Sheriff's Office saying we will update with accurate information as soon as we're able to do so. Please be patient. We'll try to give you the best confirmed and well-sourced information that we have, and stay away from a lot of the other stuff that's swirling. Also, in just a little bit, going to get some expert advice on how to have age-appropriate conversations with kids of various ages, knowing that this incident caused lockouts in 4 different school districts today, and we're just a few weeks away from that threat incident that caused 500,000 kids in Colorado to miss school. We understand that there are going to be conversations happening at home tonight and throughout the week, and want to be able to provide you with some expertise and some insight there. We also know that in this age, young people sometimes know about these situations before their parents do. If you hear anything concerning from your child about an unsafe situation at a school, please call Safe to Tell Colorado. You or your child can offer an anonymous tip at the number on the screen, 1-877-542-7233. My colleague Kim Christensen knows, certainly as a parent and as a journalist, that this is the time of year, Kim, that the pressure on students becomes most intense. And the founder of Colorado's national model, the Safe to Tell program, knows that their numbers about school threats back that up.
Yes, they do. Sadly, this is the time of the year when, whether it's the stress or the testing or the end of the school year, and sometimes frustrations are coming out, that Safe to Tell sees an increased number of reports as well. Susan Payne, the founder of Safe to Tell, is joining us now. And you have moved on to other things as well. Explain what you do now.
Well, I'm working with the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence out of CU Boulder, but they've been working with us to create Safe to Tell since the tragedy at Columbine. So what we're trying to do is build a strategy of prevention and a framework that can be used around the country. And ironically, just this morning, Sheriff Spurlock was on a call with us to participate in just that. So I know that the training and the preparedness that's going on is really incredible in Colorado, but we're trying to bring consistency around the country.
I know we're encouraging people. If you know something, report it. I mean, you hear something, young people hear something. We also have young people across our state, hundreds of thousands going back to school tomorrow. And for the next couple of weeks, what do you tell them?
Well, I think it's important to talk to children about, how we make schools safe, and also empower them that if they have anybody that's any concerning behavior. That's really what we tried to do, was lower the threshold of what does concerning behavior look like. Is there somebody that's struggling with a perceived injustice? Is there someone that's socially isolating themselves, or is concerning to you? That's what we want them to report. And that was the whole concept behind bystander engagement and early reporting and intervening early. That's the focus of a comprehensive prevention strategy, and it is important that parents talk to their kids about returning to school tomorrow.
Getting back to school and empowering them, because kids know kids. They understand each other.
Right, and kids are on the front lines. They're the ones that witness things. We want to make sure, just like in the olden days when we taught our kids how to walk across the street, or that there was strength in numbers, and what we really want to talk to them about what they might see on social media. And if they see something that is concerning to them or in their gut just doesn't feel right, we want to make sure that they report it. And if they need our help in reporting it, that is also important, in empowering them.
Thank you, Susan. And again, they can make that report anonymously, which is so critical. No one needs to know. But Kyle, safe to tell, we got to keep talking about it.
Yeah, put it in the hands of experts and let them take it from there. Kim, thank you so much. So today we saw a great logistical effort to shuttle all of the students from safety as their classrooms were cleared at STEM School Highlands Ranch, about 10 minutes away to the rec center at Northridge, where their parents were told to come and meet their kids. Buses were brought in from across Doug Coast schools to shuttle those kids. Parents who were originally told they could pick up their kids in an elementary school nearby literally ran over to the rec center when that location was changed. Jennifer Brown shared a photo of parents crowded into the gym saying that they were all waiting to hear their last name called. That was the sign that their student was safe and waiting for them. Ryan Harrer has been there for us as the families have been reunited, and Ryan, all the parents out there can all too well understand just the heartsick feeling of the wait and then the relief for those parents.
Well, imagine, Kyle, all of those parents getting the message that they needed to come here to the Northridge Recreation Center. They flooded this area. Several blocks around this recreation center are full of cars by parents who just wanted to see their kids, who were getting text messages concerned about what may have happened to their students and their friends. And when they got here, they had to line up. As you said, Kyle, those buses were making rounds, dropping off students in the bus loads so that parents could, one by one, come here with their identification and pick their student up. We spoke with parents before they were able to reunite with their children, and like you said, just the level of concern on some of these parents' faces really said it all. And one of them spoke with us. She is the mother of an 18-year-old senior who was texting from inside the classroom. That daughter says that the shooter came into the classroom, her classroom, and opened fire. Listen to this.
She called me and she was hysterical, and she told me that there had been a shooting. I tried to calm her down. I was at my work, and because my cell phone doesn't work great, I was trying to find a landline where I could start looking for my son and keep her on the line and try to calm her as much as I could, knowing she was safe, and she was worried about her brother, so I was going to try to call him on the other line. His phone was off, so it took us about a half hour to reach him.
Can you imagine a half an hour to reach your son? What a feeling that must have been, as she was reunited with both of them today. The last of these students are trickling out of this recreation center right now. Kyle, there's a command center that is now set up at the recreation center for law enforcement to figure out what's next.
Brian, thank you. So K through 12 school, kids clear down to kindergarten. We're in that school, we're in other schools, other districts even, that were put on lockout procedures today. So when we return, Dr. Max Wachtel will join me for a conversation about how we can talk to our kids, even those young ones, about feeling safe in school. So how do we talk to our kids, especially the young ones, about what happened today, about what happened a few weeks ago when a perceived school threat canceled a day of school for 500,000 kids up and down the Front Range? Our psychology expert, Dr. Max Wachtel, is here to help with that, and appreciate your perspective today. Such young kids coming out of that school.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to see those images, isn't it?
Is there a common thread that you would ask parents to think about, whether your student's an elementary schooler or a high schooler, in terms of talking to them about being safe in school?
Yes, regardless of your child's age, you have to separate your opinions from the facts that we know. Those two things are very important, and it's not a bad thing to share your opinions, but you need to explain, like, these are the facts, these are the things that we know, these are all the things that we don't know. When your kids start asking questions, were there multiple guns, why did they do this? It's okay to say you don't know, but to stick to the facts, and then you can also say, and this is how I feel about it, this is how I think about it. And then open it up to them. Do you have any questions? How do you feel about it? How do you think about it?
And if your kid doesn't want to talk about it, if they're not forthcoming about it, is that okay? Should we be polling a little bit?
Every kid is going to deal with this in a different way. It may take some kids a little longer to open up about it than others. It's really important to check in. You don't want to force this conversation on your child, but it's going to be on the kid's mind. So you want to be checking in every now and then.
Where do you start with the real young ones who saw lights today and saw law enforcement with guns and might have been scared of that, even though that was the help coming?
Of course, yeah. That looks terrifying in and of itself. So you can, first of all, you should assume that your kids are going to hear everything, whether you want them to or not. So you may want to get ahead of that. And even with the young ones, you can ask them, what did you see, or what were you afraid of, or what did you hear your friends saying at school today? If you're talking to your kid tomorrow, let's say. So you can kind of start the conversation a little slowly like that with a younger child, as opposed to maybe a middle schooler or a high schooler.
Dr. Max, appreciate your perspective. Not the first time we've had this conversation.
I wish I didn't have to be here.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Scattered showers, areas of fog in downtown Denver. The heaviest thunder showers are east of the city. Temperatures running about 10 degrees cooler than average. It gets only colder tomorrow. Broad area of low pressure in southern Colorado will bring in a cold north wind. Ahead of it, with a threat for tornadoes growing in southeastern Colorado, storms are moving quickly from the southwest toward the northeast, producing heavy rain, a lot of wind and lightning. So far, no severe cells. We do expect another round of showers tomorrow afternoon after a bit of morning fog, and then a cold north wind will change that rain to snow Wednesday night into Thursday. This night, just rain and fog, lows in the upper 30s. Tomorrow, fog early, partly sunny, and then mostly cloudy with rain in the afternoon, mixing with snow tomorrow night. Half an inch to an inch of accumulation on the ground by Thursday morning, where we start off with temperatures around freezing. We have cloudy but drier weather on Friday, warmer for the weekend, and right now we've got sunshine and 70 for Mother's Day, Kyle.
We've just learned that the president has been briefed on the school shooting that killed one student and injured 7 others at STEM Highlands Ranch today, a K-12 charter school in Dougco schools with 1,800 plus students on that small campus. The sheriff says 2 shooters, students themselves, are now in custody. A final word tonight about those who were there for those students today, from the very first moment of danger to the last. They're teachers. The men and women who, at the sound of gunshots in their school, moved immediately to keep kids in their classrooms safe, locking doors, covering windows, urging kids to take cover and stay quiet. The teachers who stayed with those scared kids, sometimes for hours, until they were able to be reunited with their parents at long last. This just so happens to be a week which is set aside across America to appreciate teachers for the work that they do. We do indeed. We'll have updates throughout the evening across the networks of 9 News on 9news.com and on 9 News at 9 and 10.